People you talking about, they spent money on white women. They set up bars and they went playing pool and golf for $1,000 a hole, and they were known to make millions and millions when there wasn't no high taxes, and they were not hindered by white America. They were allowed to see the white America has completely closed all the doors on me. I'm not allowed to work in America, out of America. I was stopped right in my prime just when I started making money. So you can't compare me with nobody like Joe Lewis or nobody.
If you are black, if you are brown, if you are indigenous, and if you are poor, this system is rigged and it is rotten to the core, and we gonna unbreak it. That's it. And that's all.
That other kind of socialism that revolutionizes the workplace, brings democracy to the workplace for the first time.
So that's one way. And then the other thing is, in my more optimistic days, he's such a perfect endpoint of everything that is toxic and dysfunctional about the United States, about capitalism, about the 80s, that maybe this is the final sort of disgusting burst before we evolve or change to something better.
Talk about some things about why we need a new party. So I thought that'd be a good way to kind of do this. Why do we need a new party? We need a new party because both parties suck,
What are they talking about? Fortified. Are you fortified for the long run? Do you have your cemetery clothes on? Are you coffin ready to live and die for something bigger than you, like a fundamental transformation of a capitalist civilization?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Radical Democracy Show. I'm your host, Kamala Rose, back after a couple-week hiatus, actually unplanned hiatus, but just needed some personal time. So glad to be back with you. Thank you so much to everyone for joining us tonight. Please, just right out of the gate, if you haven't done so already, do us a favor and immediately hit the like button down below, subscribe to the channel, share this out far and wide, help us spread the word and grow this platform. Thank you so much to everyone from our Coffee and Patreon communities who help to keep this show going. If you feel so compelled to and you can afford to do so, we always need the help. We most certainly need the help more than ever. So if you can support for as low as $1, you can head over to coffee.com/radical democracy. That's ko-fi.com/radical democracy. You can also find us on Patreon at patreon.com/radical democracy. And as always, links to those sites are in the description box below. So you just open up the description box, click the link, head over there, show us some love, send us some love. No pressure, no worries if you can't afford it. Always appreciate you just being here with us and hanging out and talking and engaging in the chat. So if you can't afford to support us in that way, please just support us by commenting. Leave your thoughts over in the comments as we go through the show. I read every single comment, and we'll be reading out most of the comments. So yes, thank you so much to everyone for being here. And I've got a lot to get to tonight. I'm catching up on 2 weeks of stories that I missed out on. So I'm going to try to get through as many stories as possible in about 2 hours. I don't want to go much longer than 2 hours. So we'll be here till about 9:30, maybe 10 if I push it, but I'll really try to keep things speeding along for all of us. Okay. Shout out to X in the comments, Corey Saylor, and American Social Democracy. Check out American Social Democracy's channel if you haven't already. Support our fellow comrades. So thank you so much to everyone for joining us, and let's get to it. All right. Like I said, I got a lot to get to tonight, so we'll breeze through as much as we can here. All right. And try to cover it with the right amount of, time and energy spent on all these important stories. All right. So, all right, let's get to it, y'all. One sec. So for my first story, I'm just going to do a quick story. This will be super quick, just a quick feel-good story, something that I came across. Someone sent this along to me, and I just wanted to shout out a cooperative that is doing some really important work. So let me share this story out of Forbes here. Okay. So we have a cooperative that is tackling homelessness with its own house for queer people of color, Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. And this is an article in Forbes by Molly Spray Reagan. This is published on February 25th. So you can see here just some of the folks there from Queer the Land is the group that started this. This is the organization that started this effort. And I just wanted to shout them out because this is really important work. This is what direct action looks like, really. And so I'm really proud and to see, something working, more democratically through a cooperative, collectively owned and operated cooperative. And I love to see people hitting at the root of homelessness directly. George Carlin famously has a stand-up where he says, they shouldn't call it homelessness, they should call it houselessness, because a home is like this vague thing, home is where the heart is, right? But the reality is that these people are just houseless, right? What they need is houses, right? And if we just gave them houses, right, you could solve that crisis very directly, very immediately, right? So it's a political choice to leave people homeless. And so we want to constantly point that out. Housing should be a human right in this country, in the richest country in the history of the world. Housing should be a human right. Not even under past systems. I mean, not under slavery or feudalism, monarchism. None of those systems had the same homelessness crisis that we have under capitalism. All right. So this is not something that has happened all throughout history. This is something very unique to capitalism. So we should, make sure that we recognize that. So this happened in Seattle, Washington, and a group of queer persons of color, Black, Indigenous, brown folks, Latino, Asian folks got together and they bought a house. So in January, members of Seattle collective Queer the Land accomplished a dream that was years in the making, buying their own home to support queer people of color experiencing homelessness. Quote, "It feels amazing," said housing coordinator Ivana Enabulele. "It feels like finally it has happened. When it first happened, I was sobbing. To be able to give people housing, it's indescribable." So Queer the Land formed in 2016 when members of two other queer collectives came together to design solutions to the high levels of homelessness currently facing their communities. It was groups of folks who were tired of their friends and family and community being pressed out by gentrification, said Enna Bulele, and tired of folks doing GoFundMes because of being homeless. That's just not sustainable, right? These, GoFundMes every time you're homeless, you have to have so much, publicity for it. It's just not sustainable. It's not a sustainable model to have people doing these private GoFundMes. We need public solutions to the housing crisis and the homelessness crisis. We have, on any given day, there's over 500,000 people homeless in the United States, 550,000 homeless people, about 50,000 homeless veterans. And this is a very solvable crisis. All right. There's more empty units of housing than there are homeless people in this country. So this is a very solvable crisis. All right. We just need political will. That's all. So for the past few years, Queer the Land has engaged in a number of mutual aid programs to support the community while simultaneously working to raise and save money to purchase a home. On January 15, 2021, after a full year of negotiations, the purchase was made. So shout out to them. Real kudos for this. This is amazing. Enna Bulele goes on. They said, they participated in the entire legal process of the purchase and said it was extremely challenging. They say, I cannot convey how difficult it was when it comes to the racism we faced around purchasing the house. It was just very difficult, and it shouldn't have taken a year. One of my proudest moments was being able to persevere during a pandemic. That's another amazing thing, that they're doing this all in the midst of a pandemic. It's amazing work, warms my heart truly, and is just a really proper, true feel-good story. I mean, it's not feel-good in the sense that you got individuals having to, solve this issue that should be solved on a much grander scale, but you have people coming together collectively and democratically coming together. And I think that is a feel-good story. So not feel good in the sense that homelessness exists and that it's a problem that people like this have to solve on, anything close to an individual level, but feel good in the sense of we actually have democratic, cooperative work in order to commit direct action and actually go directly to the heart of the homelessness problem. And so another member of the group goes on to say, it kind of feels unbelievable, added Linda Chastain, communications and development coordinator at Queer the Land. It feels really good to be able to take a little piece of the figurative pie from all the things Black and Indigenous, queer and trans and two-spirit people of color have had to undergo for hundreds of years in this country. It gives me so much confidence and faith and energy to claim more abundance for Queer the Land and for myself and for my community in the future. So the 12-bedroom, 3-story house will need about a year of repairs before anyone moves in. When it's finished, about 8 to 10 people will be able to live there at any given time. In addition to the living quarters, the house will be used as a community gathering space for other Queer the Land members. There will be a garden to grow food, an apothecary, a food pantry, office space, and a basement folks can use for events. Enna Bulele said the co-op should ultimately work like a, quote, small economy disrupting capitalism. This is a true disruption of capitalism. All right. This is a true disruption of the rent-seeking capitalist, economy that we live under. All right. This is democratic, cooperative ownership and control over, over institutions, right? Housing, workplaces, businesses. This is what we advocate for here on the show. We are building a democratic workplace here, one worker, one vote on all major decisions. And so we strongly support the cooperative movement in every way, shape, and form. I believe in democracy, not just in our workplaces and in our business, but I also believe in democracy in our housing, in our food, in everything that we deem in our communications, anything that we deem a public good or a human right. We should have democratic control over those institutions, right? So it's a shame that we suspend democracy in all of the critical places of our lives, right? We say we believe in democracy in this country, but we suspend democracy in the workplace. We suspend democracy in our housing. We suspend democracy in our education. It just doesn't make sense to me to say that we believe in democracy when we suspend democracy in the places where it would seemingly matter most. Okay, So this is a really promising effort. And I'm really proud of these folks for going out there and doing what they did. And it's 8 to 10 people that it will house, but this is how we're going to have to do it. This is how the real revolution will be built from the bottom up. We can't always wait for top down solutions. If we wait, we will wait and wait, and we will die of old age waiting, right? There's a famous quote from a priest who started the first worker cooperative of the Mondragon cooperatives, Father Arismendi, who said, if we wait around for the capitalists to give us what we need, then we'll wait so long that we'll die of old age. All right. And so that's where that quote originally comes from. And it's someone who took matters into their own hands, built a worker cooperative about 60 years ago with 6 people. And now that cooperative is a cooperative that is the 4th largest company in Spain and employs about 100,000 workers. So these things can happen. They take time to build. There's no doubt about that. But this is what dual power is about. It's about building up institutions to replace the failing institutions that exist today. And we need to build dual power through just building collective power. And this is certainly a way to do it, not only in our workplaces, but also in our housing is a really powerful way to do it. So if we believe that housing is a human right, we're going to need institutions like this in order to establish that and maintain that, and to maintain democratic control over these institutions. All right. So I'm not looking for some top-down government solution per se, but I do think that the government plays a role in assisting and helping to fund people that are looking to do initiatives like this. All right. And I wish that they would have gotten more public support and government support for this. But they did. I will say they said, Queer the Land's other big accomplishment is that through donations and grants, including one for $200,000 from Seattle's Equitable Development Initiative, the group was able to obtain the house without a mortgage. Okay, so they've bought this house. This is not like they have a mortgage to pay or anything like that. They were able to outright purchase this home. Now all they have to do is repair it up and it's theirs. It's theirs forever. All right. And there are resources like this in our communities. And these are the kinds of actions that we really need to be taking in order to ensure housing as a human right. If that's something that we really believe, I just don't think that we can wait around and wait for politicians to do it for us, because the capitalists, they have incentive to fight against that, right? Landlords want to be able to sit on their behinds and to collect rent from people when they have no real value that they add to the system, right? Wouldn't you much rather manage your home yourself? Doesn't everyone want to have their own home? Isn't that a dream of pretty much everyone? And so if you could just collectively have ownership over your home, then this is something that solves that problem, right? No landlords. I don't want to see anyone having the right to charge rent to someone in a place that they don't live. It shouldn't exist. All right. And so this is the real way to combat that disgusting practice of capitalism, where some, a handful of people, much of them descendant from a slave owning past, are able to capitalize on this system and to be, to have rent-seeking measures where they don't live there. They don't, they're not concerned with the issues in that housing, take longer, drag their feet on repairs. They're incentivized not to repair, to charge more rent. The rents just keep going up and up and up, even though our wages do not. And like in Berlin, Germany, they have a new law. They have a law that they passed a year or two ago in Berlin, Germany. So one of the largest, major cities, capital of Germany. Is it the capital? It might be Frankfurt. Okay. Yeah. Could be Frankfurt. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's either Frankfurt. It's Berlin. Okay. Tammy, super producer Tammy says it's Berlin. So, capital city there, Berlin, Germany. They have made it so that they passed a law that says for the next 5 years, no landlord can raise the rent on any tenant, and you cannot charge a new tenant any more than you charge existing tenants, right? So they have put a total rent control rent freeze in place in Berlin, Germany. Meanwhile, like that doesn't even get discussed here in the United States, but it should be a topic of discussion. Particularly during a pandemic, it's absurd to allow people to raise rents on people in the middle of a pandemic where there are over 10 million jobs have disappeared from the economy, and most of those likely will never return. All right. So just wanted to give a shout out to them. Kudos to what they're doing over there at Queer the Land in Seattle, Washington. Keep up the amazing work, y'all. Really, really love what y'all are doing over there. And you have, our utmost support over here in solidarity with your efforts. All right. Keep it up. All right. So let's see. All right. Corey Saylor says, my last apartment went from $1,500 a month to $1,900 a month in 2 years. That's absurd. That is absurd. Yeah, that sounds like the way that they hike rents in Boston. We used to have rent control in the 90s in Boston. After they ended rent control in the next 15 years, the rents tripled. Okay, on average, they tripled after they removed rent control. So it is absolutely absurd. We do need rent control in this country, and yeah, I mean, rents can go up, and your wages don't, right? Rents just seemingly automatically go up every year, even though your wages don't go up like that, right? So it's absurd, right? And this is why I'm in some ways against a universal basic income without putting rent control measures in place first, because if we don't put rent control measures in place, all of our universal basic income will just get sucked up by landlords, and ultimately will just get pulled up into the top 1% that way. All right. So Corey Saylor says they are in West Covina, California. All right. So yeah, California, all over California, New York, Boston, in the major cities, I mean, rents have just been out of control and skyrocketing. And I'm sure it's not all that much better in rural areas either. All right. If anyone is from rural areas and knows of similar trends, let us know as well. But this is true all across the country. And as we talk about the minimum wage discussion tonight, I'd just like folks to keep in mind, the idea of rents and what the average rents are in any given place. All right. Okay, let's keep pushing along to our next story here. Please, if you haven't done so already, hit the like button down below, subscribe to the channel, share this out far and wide on social media. All right. So for our next story up, let me just pull up this video. I'm going to play a video and then we'll come back and talk about this. So, yeah. So for our next story, I'm going to be talking about, there was some news about the life expectancy for, there was a historically significant decline in life expectancy in the United States just over the first 6 months of 2020. All right. So this is only for 6 months of 2020. All right. We had historic decline in life expectancy, particularly for Black and Latino Americans. All right. So let's take a look at this story from Democracy Now! Here. Just going to listen to a short video and then we'll come back and discuss.
Life expectancy in the United States fell by a full year during the first 6 months of 2020, largely due to the coronavirus pandemic. It's the largest drop since World War II. Life expectancy for Black Americans dropped 2.7 years and 1.9 years for Latinx people. According to the Centers for Disease Control, the overall death rate from COVID-19 for Black Americans is 3 times higher than for white Americans. Meanwhile, in Florida, Republican Governor Ron DeSantis is defending his decision to prioritize giving vaccines to wealthy Floridians living in 2 mostly white planned communities with ties to the billionaire Uline family, one of the biggest donors to the Republican Party.
All right. So this was just some wild news that I came across and wanted to share because that is shocking numbers. I mean, life expectancy for, folks that look like me, all right, fell by 2.7 years just over the first 6 months of 2020. All right. So that's how, as far as they were able to measure so far. Things got worse after that with COVID. All right. Things got worse with COVID. So you're talking about a more significant decrease likely. All right. So that's just over 6 months. They said 1.9 years for Latino Americans, and just under a year for white Americans, right? And the COVID death rates they mentioned as well are 3 times higher for Black Americans than white Americans. And, folks like Adolph Reed Jr. and other folks will point out, and I don't totally disagree with them, that the better indicator of, cause of death from COVID is going to be your class. If you're a wealthy Black person, you're much likelier to survive COVID than you're likelier to survive COVID than a poor white person. I don't know that, truly, but there are studies that have shown that, class is a better indicator of the outcomes of COVID than, say, race. But because class and race and gender and sexual orientation are so intertwined and so closely intertwined, then whenever something impacts class, it's going to disproportionately impact marginalized groups, right? So, however you want to talk about this, the issue is it's hurting poor people for sure. It's hurting poor people, but those poor people are going to disproportionately be Black, Indigenous, Latino, trans, gay, so that's just another factor that we have to keep in mind. And this is significant, right? You're talking about 3 years less of life, essentially, 3 less years of life. I think it was more, it was like 2.9 for, I think, Black women, and like 2.5 or 2.6 for Black men. It was, one or the other. So someone for one of those groups, it's close to 3 years that they lost on average, just in the first 6 months of 2020. And it could be an even more significant decline. I mean, you just took off 3 years of people's lives. That's insane. That is intense. So I had to point that out. Just want to call attention to it. It's an absurd, number. And just historically, they said since World War II, we haven't seen a decline like this since World War II. So worth noting and pointing out. All right. Let's keep cruising along here to our next story. Let me just see. Okay. All right. So for my next story, I actually am sneaking this one in, but I wanted to, a few stories broke on Tara Reade, and I just wanted to get these stories in because they're topical. And I don't think that they're getting nearly enough attention in mainstream media, particularly liberal mainstream media. We have to be real. Left-leaning mainstream media, liberal-leaning, I should say, because I do not consider this. It's not globally left. Liberals in America are right-wingers in most countries around the world. Okay, they are considered right at best, center right, really. Conservative, center right at best. All right, just look at the policies that they support, and again, globally, what we call center and centrist in this country is really right wing in around the world, internationally. All right, so we're doing them a favor even calling this, to say that it's left leaning. It's really not what most people would consider left outside of the United States. So liberal media, MSNBC, CNN, the major networks, ABC, everything except for Fox News, essentially all the mainstream networks except for Fox News essentially have just essentially completely ignored this story. And it's because it paints Biden in a bad light. It portrays Biden in a bad light, and it should, because Biden stands credibly accused of sexual assault and in fact rape. All right, President Joe Biden stands credibly accused of rape, and the story has largely gone ignored, or there's been outright propaganda in some outlets against Tara Reade and these accusations that she made. And so I just wanted to cover a couple of stories here. So let me pull up the first story here, and they're related, really. But these two stories broke yesterday, and I'm going to share Fox News because I have to, because sorry, I don't like to use Fox News as a source typically, but when other outlets refuse to cover it, that's the only option that we have. Okay. So, all right. So here we go. So this is an article on Fox News titled, published yesterday, titled "New York Times columnist blasted for claim Biden accuser Tara Reade statements, quote, full of inconsistencies." Michelle Goldberg was slammed by actress Rose McGowan, among others. And this is by Joseph Wolfson of Fox News. All right, give me one sec. New York Times columnist Michelle Goldberg attempted to summarize Monday why Democrats are not overwhelmingly calling for the resignation of Democratic New York Governor Andrew Cuomo amid a pair of scandals. Goldberg began her column by saying it, quote, seems obvious enough that allegations of sexual harassment and inappropriate advances against Cuomo are credible, and it is, quote, hard to imagine how an inquiry could exonerate the governor. The columnist predicted that, quote, if this scandal had broken a few years ago, high-profile Democrats would have felt no choice but to call for Cuomo's resignation. Since then, however, a few things have happened. Quote, so quoting Goldberg from Goldberg's article. Okay, so quoting from Goldberg's article here. Quote, after the killing of George Floyd and last summer's protest, the locus of our culture wars shifted from sex to race, Goldberg added. Tara Reade made allegations against Joe Biden, which got national attention, but turned out to be full of inconsistencies. And most significantly, among many Democrats, there's tremendous bitterness toward those who pressured Al Franken to leave the Senate in 2018 after he was accused of grabbing several women's butts. It is unclear what Goldberg meant by her statement that Reade's allegations against the now sitting president were, quote, full of inconsistencies. Critics slammed the Times columnist, with some on social media accusing her of throwing Reade under the bus. In her latest, so this is a quote from Jacobin magazine journalist Branko Marcetic, and they say, quote, in her latest column, Michelle Goldberg blames Tara Reade for the end of the Me Too movement, not a partisan media class that radically and abruptly shifted its standards and approach on this issue to protect the politician it favored. Appalling beyond words. Another quote, Goldberg was a major part of this media push, typically by claiming that Reade's story had, quote, ambiguities or was, quote, inconsistent when compared to Christine Blasey Ford, that was Kavanaugh's accuser, who she personally championed. But in fact, anyone who looked at the facts of the case knows that Blasey Ford, who I find credible, this person is saying, this is Branko Marcetic, had many inconsistencies in her story. One of the things Republicans used against her, didn't tell her story for decades, not even to her husband, and 3 key witnesses said they couldn't remember the party. Now, and Marcetic continued, at the time, there were reams of pages from liberal columnists explaining why this didn't make Ford uncredible, all of which they reversed on when it came to Reade and Biden. It's as if they mentally heaped all of Ford's issues onto Reade, who had a lot of corroborating evidence. All right. So if folks are not familiar, I talked about this in my personal life. This was before, this story kind of broke before, right before I started doing my show. And so I never really got a chance to talk about these allegations on air, but I have talked about them publicly on social media very openly and explain my position. I have stood with Tara Reade since the very beginning. Her accusations are absolutely credible. All right. She was a staffer of Biden's. She alleges essentially that he, asked her to bring his gym bag to him in the Senate. This was when Joe Biden was working for the Senate, decades ago. She brought him his gym bag and he pinned her to a wall, according to Tara Reade, pinned her to a wall, put his hands up her skirt and penetrated her vagina with his fingers. I'm so sorry. I should have given a content warning. I deeply, deeply apologize for not giving a content warning about rape. I really should have. And I am sincerely sorry for that. But, these are some graphic descriptions of rape, and I do apologize for that. But this is, and for anyone that might say that, does that, rise to the definition of rape? According to the Justice Department of the United States. Okay, so according to the U.S. Justice Department, this is their definition of rape, which they updated, just a few years ago. Okay. So Department of Justice expands definition of rape to ensure justice. This is from prisonlegalnews.org. Okay. This is from August 22nd, 2016. And it says the U.S. Department of Justice has broadened the definition of rape, first established in 1927, to include, quote, penetration, no matter how slight, of the vagina or anus with any body part or object, or oral penetration by a sex organ of another person without the consent of the victim. Okay, so I'll read that one more time just for clarity. It says they broadened the definition of rape, the U.S. Department of Justice, which was first established in 1927, to include, quote, penetration, no matter how slight, of the vagina or anus with any body part or object. Okay, so that would include inserting your fingers into a person's vagina, quote, without the consent of the victim, which Tara Reade says she did not consent to at the time. All right. So she told her mother about it. She says at the time, she told her husband later on in life when she got married, she told her husband about this. So she mentioned this, contemporaneously multiple times throughout her life. And her mother, there's even a famous, a phone call that was found where her mother called into the Larry King show and told Larry King, hey, she said she was from San Obispo, Texas, I believe. And that's exactly where Tara Reade was from. She was a caller from San Obispo, Texas. And she said, my daughter works for a prominent senator. I'm not going to name who they are, but this person, raped my daughter, sexually assaulted my daughter. She might have used different language at the time. She said he assaulted my daughter, sexually assaulted my daughter. And she's afraid to come forward with these allegations because she's afraid of the retaliation that would come against her. So she has contemporaneous corroborating evidence about this allegation. So this isn't just something that she came out with after the Me Too movement or anything like that, right? And so for this New York Times columnist to claim that her story was inconsistent, there's no evidence. Michelle Goldberg has presented no evidence to suggest that Tara Reade's story was inconsistent. There are no inconsistencies in her story. And by the way, there are oftentimes the fact that someone, a survivor of rape, has an inconsistency in their story is not a reason to totally discredit them. Okay. There are oftentimes inconsistencies in the stories because, one, it's an incredibly traumatic thing to happen to someone being raped. And so you're not always sitting there taking notes about all of these things. And then because of the times right before, it was even harder to sort of level these charges because of the way that things were at the time, right? We didn't have a Me Too movement that gave a lot of, shielded a lot of survivors of rape and allowed them to come forward. We didn't have that decades ago when Tara Reade was alleging this. And so it was even more dangerous for women and other victims of rape, survivors of rape, to come forward and to tell their stories, right? And there's really nothing to gain from this, right? What does she stand to gain from doing something like this? She, her life has been turned upside down because of this. And she was attacked by people that consider themselves advocates of the Me Too movement. Folks like Alyssa Milano, who is a prominent Me Too activist, right, has attacked her and attacked her credibility. Why? Because she's a supporter of Joe Biden. So, you talk about, Donald Trump is a rapist. Absolutely. I believe that he is. He was credibly accused of rape by his wife and by many other women. Joe Biden has been credibly accused of sexual assault, harassment, and rape by multiple women. Okay. This is not a one-off thing. You can look up, Lucy Flores is another woman. She was a Democratic politician who Biden, sexually assaulted at a campaign event. All right. And she came forward with those allegations. There was another woman who came forward and there were people that corroborated her story contemporaneously, and also other women came forward. There's over 6 women from I believe it's over 7 women that have credibly accused Joe Biden, not to mention all the pictures that we have of Joe Biden inappropriately touching little girls. All right. Like I can pull them up if we need to. All right. But there is plenty of evidence of that. And so to act like Donald Trump was the only, one with credible accusations against him was completely absurd. And it was one of the many reasons why I refused to vote for Joe Biden. And I do not regret that in any way, especially given what Joe Biden has done to this point. I certainly don't regret that decision at all. Yes, this, just getting back to the story about this columnist, is claiming that she, didn't have, it's absolutely absurd and totally inconsistent with Christine Blasey Ford, who did have inconsistencies in her story. But yet again, I still believed Christine Blasey Ford, who accused Brett Kavanaugh, and I totally stood in solidarity with Christine Blasey Ford and was right there with her, championing her cause, saying that she deserved justice. And I 100% believe the story that she laid out. Regardless of the inconsistencies, I don't expect someone to remember in perfect detail a story from decades ago like that. But the reality is that when you're traumatized like that, you definitely remember. All right. So maybe some other people didn't remember the party that Christine Blasey Ford was mentioning, but they weren't raped at that party. So I don't expect them to remember some one-off party for them that had no significance. I expect somebody that had a significant traumatic life event for that to be seared into their memory forever. Okay. So maybe you get a few of the details wrong, but you remember the broad strokes of something like that. This is absurd. It's disgusting. This is, propaganda. It's a smearing of a, survivor of an alleged, rape survivor. And this is totally antithetical to the Me Too movement. Believe women. We were supposed to believe women up until it's a woman accusing somebody that's on our team, right? So as soon as women start accusing people on, quote, our team, the Democratic team, all of a sudden we don't believe those women anymore. We question those women's credibility. We smear those women. We make false claims about these women, saying that their stories were inconsistent and provide no evidence. You're a journalist. If you're going to say that her story was inconsistent, you damn well better come up with some evidence of the inconsistencies. There were no inconsistencies. All right. And so that actually brings me to my second story about Tara Reade. All right. And so let me just pull this one up. Again, I also have to get this story also comes out of Fox News, because mainstream outlets are not reporting on this, and that should outrage you. All right. As a consumer of news, it should outrage you that mainstream news outlets are simply ignoring this woman's story. All right. Think about how they treated Donald Trump, the grab him by the pussy tape, all that sort of stuff. Right. It got, mainstream coverage, was played over and over and over again. Tara Reade was not given the same chance. Her story was covered up and smeared. She was smeared by these people, and in the same groups that were supposed to be helping women in the Me Too movement, ignored her claims because they supported Joe Biden. All right. So, yes. All right. So let me pull up this next story on Tara Reade. And also out of Fox News. So listen, I'll give the same caveat I gave last time. I do not like using Fox News as a source. Unfortunately, I have no choice but to use Fox News as a source on this story because mainstream liberal media refuses to cover the Tara Reade's credible allegations against Joe Biden, credible rape allegations against Joe Biden. Okay. This is unacceptable as far as I'm concerned. All right. And part of what frustrates me so much about the mainstream media. All right. I'm just one dude in his bedroom right now. All right. Why can I cover this story? I'm one broke dude with no backing, no financial funding, covering this story. They are 24-hour news networks. They have all the time in the world. They cover the most frivolous shit in the world. All right. They do all these fluff pieces on Andrew Cuomo. And I didn't even get a chance to cover the Andrew Cuomo story, right? And all the media fawning over Andrew Cuomo. Don't forget that Andrew Cuomo was the guy that they were talking about getting to replace Joe Biden as the Democratic nominee to run against Donald Trump. All right. So he was like the media darling. Meanwhile, the dude lied and covered up, thousands of deaths in nursing homes, and simultaneously was sexually harassing his staffers. All right. But he was, you got people they were calling Cuomo-sexuals and, just fawning over this dude. They had his brother on CNN, a major news outlet, CNN, 24-hour news outlet, corporate media. You let his brother, Chris Cuomo, interview him repeatedly in an unchallenging way, which allowed him to go unchallenged and uncritiqued and uncriticized substantively. Meanwhile, he was, letting old people die and sexually harassing staffers. But, CNN gave him cover. All right. And allowed him. I mean, he won like a daytime Emmy for his performances during the pandemic, while he was lying. What we found out was ultimately lies. All right. And the cover-ups. All right. So I need to take a quick breath here. Let me sip something before. All right. So getting back to this story. Tara Reade's lawyer requests New York Times correction compensation for publishing Social Security number. So a lawyer for Joe Biden accused, hold on, let me see if I can make this. Okay, yeah. A lawyer for Joe Biden accuser Tara Reade has sent a lengthy letter to the New York Times requesting a correction over its reporting of her story last year, as well as compensation after the paper accidentally published her Social Security number. All right. This is an alleged rape survivor's Social Security number. All right. That the New York Times published. All right. And kept up. Okay. So let me just read. Reade's attorney, Mosh Admon, wrote to Times executive editor Dean Bacquet on Tuesday about the paper's reporting of her accusations, which largely focused on her background rather than her 1993 sexual assault claim against her former boss, then U.S. Senator Joe Biden. One aspect of her background that drew intense scrutiny was her education from Antioch University, with news outlets like The Times suggesting Reade was intentionally misrepresenting her credentials. Okay, so listen to what that is. That is the New York Times, the paper of record in the United States, is suggesting that she was intentionally misrepresenting her credentials. That is attacking this is when you victim blaming, okay? This is how you attack the victim instead of attacking the powerful politician who is, stands credibly accused of rape. Instead of doing that, they covered up the story and then turned around and again smeared her, claimed that she was intentionally misrepresenting her educational credentials, as if that has anything to do with somebody accusing someone of rape. All right. Like, what does that have to do with anything? All right. So, quote, Tara engaged me to right an egregious wrong. Your false publication implying she intentionally lied about her undergraduate credentials and faked her way into law school, a deliberate falsification that permanently blighted her reputation, Admin wrote to Bacquet. Your actions are deeply troubling, both by the irreparable damage they caused to Tara's life and in the broader scope that a media outlet of your prominence can ruin the life of any private citizen in an instant. A packet sent to the Times, a copy of which was obtained by Fox News, included a February letter sent from Antioch University's general counsel that confirmed Reade was enrolled from fall 2000 through spring 2001 and later worked for the university as a prior learning evaluator from 2008 to 2010. So they just flat out lied in the New York Times, all right? They have no excuse. It is utterly unacceptable to print false information like that, okay? For the paper of record in the United States. When I say the paper of record, it's literally the paper that historians use when they go back in time, when they read through, historical references. The New York Times is the paper of record for anything, any sort of historian tracing back, through news articles of historical news articles. All right. The New York Times is that paper. All right. So that's why they call it the paper of record. All right. So this is the paper of record in the United States. And they have a duty to uphold basic journalistic integrity, which they did not do in this case, all to protect a powerful, as far as I'm concerned, right-wing politician, conservative politician, Joe Biden, all right, who, again, stands credibly accused of rape, sexual harassment, and sexual assault, all right, by multiple accusers. They go on to state, the packet also contained various emails and corroboration documenting Reid's tenure at the university and a 2005 certificate of law studies from Washington State Bar Association. Okay, so it says the lawyer goes on to say, her lawyer admin goes on to say, your publication was unprivileged and it caused Tara's life irreparable damage. Therefore, you are liable for defamation. However, you now have an opportunity to remedy some of the incredible harm you've done by publishing a correction or clarification to your defamatory articles stating that Tara did not intentionally lie about her undergraduate credentials and fake her way into law school. So get that, the New York Times still has not corrected the story, okay? Even though it has been proven repeatedly that what they printed was false, they still refuse to correct the story, okay? The lawyer continues, your tainted publications about Tara, skillfully crafted to smear her character ever so subtly, presenting an unbalanced take on her failings without once mentioning her successes, facilitated the wholesale destruction of her reputation and career. Following your lead, half the country has labeled her a, quote, liar, crackpot, and other vile denigrations. Because of your, I'll tell you which half of the country that is the liberal half, the people that so-called supposedly support victims, survivors of rape, that supposedly believe women, hashtag Me Too. Those very same people are the same people tearing this woman, smearing this woman, and tearing her life apart, okay? So following your lead, half the country has labeled her a liar, crackpot, and other vile denigrations. Because of your publication, she suffered the ignominy of being criminally investigated, evicted, sacked from employment, and other unbearable personal hardships that you will likely never comprehend. What's worse, your craftily styled attack on Tara, including your false accusation that she is somehow a Russian operative, incited a nonstop, ongoing online harassment campaign against her, including multiple death threats and the stalking of her and her daughter. Okay, so this is what the fallout of her. To anyone who thinks that a survivor of rape stands to benefit somehow, that there's some sort of benefit to coming out there and publicly, accusing such a powerful person like this. To anyone who thinks that there's some benefit to that, they did it for the money or something. What money to get is there to gain for this? For all of the what you stand to lose. You stand to lose so much more than you stand to gain, especially when it's a, sorry to say, but liberal politician who people generally like, right? Everybody's Uncle Joe, right? Not the kind of person you're just gonna, level accusations against. It just doesn't. It just doesn't make sense. Some of what they did. One of the things that the New York Times did, they went and interviewed one of her former landlords. All right, before they interviewed Tara Reade, they interviewed her landlord. All right, when the hell do you see the same kind of criticism over Donald Trump's accusers? I do not believe that should be an acceptable act of, quote, journalism by any, for any person in any situation. All right, to go and interview somebody's landlord. I don't know about y'all, but how many of y'all have landlords that have nice things to say about you? I don't know about you, but me, none, zero, got none. All right. There's no landlord that I want being a reference, a character reference for me in any way, shape, or form. All right. So that is just beyond absurd to use her landlord and to interview her landlord before you interview her. All right. So that's what the New York Times did. All right. And if you see me getting a little upset over this, is because, you haven't heard me talk about this issue before, but trust me, I have talked about this thing ad nauseum in my personal social media and made my stance very clear, quite to the, disdain of many of my liberal friends and, family members, essentially, but mostly friends, who were just completely flabbergasted that I was, accused, sharing this, story, of a credible accusation of rape against a politician during the primary. I mean, I was touting this all throughout the primary because this should have been disqualifying. This should have been one of many disqualifying factors. I mean, there are just a swath of disqualifying factors. I mean, Joe Biden's crime bill, disqualifying. Joe Biden's bankruptcy bill that prevents the discharge of student loan debt, disqualifying for me. You know, like there are plenty of things that disqualify Joe Biden as a candidate in my mind. You know, rape was just yet another one of those things, but absolutely way high up there on my list, I would say. You know, just so this is unfortunate. All right. So Tara Reade is suing the New York Times. You know, she's asking for a correction to the story, and some, and to hold them financially liable for defamation, for defaming her character, for just printing false, falsehoods, lies, all right, about her and never correcting the record, all right, and she got fired from her job, evicted from her home. You know, this is a rape survivor, a credibly, somebody who stands, who has a credible accusation of rape, and her life has been totally ruined. All right. And she didn't get the same kind of, liberal love that Christine Blasey Ford got because she was accusing a Republican, right? That's not how principle works, right? If you're going to be principled, principle means it applies across the board, not just when it's somebody you don't like. Your principles have to apply even in the case of somebody, when it's somebody on your team or somebody that you like. And if you don't apply the principle, then you're not a principled person, all right? You're just a political hack is all you are, all right? And these people in the New York Times, it's political hackery is all this is, all right? So they go on to say, actually, and I just want to continue to read from this because they published her social security number in the New York Times. All right. So this is where it gets really absurd. Admin then addressed the Times' mistake of accidentally publishing Reid's unredacted social security number from a document that was left on its website for hours. On April 13th, 2020, you published Tara's complete social security number on your website, where it remained nearly 9 hours, visible to your 7 million subscribers and many others. Your reckless endangerment of Tara's privacy is extremely worrying and a clear violation of multiple laws in Washington and New York, Admin continued. You have no defense for publishing Tara's social security number. Because of your actions, she has been the target of identity theft and has had very personal information exposed. You are liable for damages caused to Tara by your recklessness. Therefore, I request that your counsel contact me no later than March 10th to discuss fair compensation. And I think that that's absolutely fair. I mean, you published a rape survivor's, social security number. Like, that's absurd. Like, that's for the New York Times to publish anyone's social security number is absurd, beyond absurd. I mean, this is, again, journalistic malpractice, all right? They absolutely must pay for this, all right? They have done irreparable damage to this woman's life, and they must pay for this. All right. So Tara Reade, if you for some wild reason happen to come across this, just know that I am 100% in solidarity with you. I absolutely believe your accusations against Joe Biden. They are immensely credible. You have been completely consistent throughout this ordeal, and extremely courageous in doing what you've done, against all of these powerful forces that you've had to stand up against, and to still stick by and to hold to this story and to try to do what's right and to be on the right side of history and to have your story heard. And I am ashamed of the people in the party that I used to belong to that have, smeared you and tore you down and attacked and assaulted your character instead of doing what they claim to do in believing women. And I've been someone that has been critical of things like that. I do not believe in phrases like this idea of just like blanket believing women in all instances. You have to, there should be, there has to be credibility there. There has to be, credible accusations. There has to be, you want to see some sort of credible accusations, right? And you want due process, right? I want to see due process, right? A fair investigation. There should have been an FBI investigation into these accusations. There were not. It was not the same kind of investigation that was done for Brett Kavanaugh, right? And that was even weak. That was beyond weak and inadequate, right? And even that was more than what Tara Reade got. So she absolutely deserved better than that, and she was not given a fair shake. And people that claim to be allies to survivors and to be on the side of women, and and these liberals really just completely threw her under the bus and turned their back on her because she was accusing somebody that was on their team, the guy they wanted to see beat Donald Trump. And I was saying this back when Bernie Sanders was still in the race and was still a credible option. And I was shouting this from the mountaintops. All right. And nobody in none of my liberal friends wanted to listen, and they call me all kinds of names, and I'm a Russian bot and I'm a Russian propagandist and all kinds of things, because why? Because I, read through, listened to this woman's story repeatedly, read all the information, did my own little, research, and came out on the other side believing, her credible accusations. If you don't believe Tara Reade, you got to tell me what is it about her story that you don't find credible? And how does it differ from somebody like Christine Blasey Ford or anyone that accused Donald Trump of rape, all right, or sexual assault, all right? Have some consistency, and this is what it means to be principled. All right. And this is why I just can't rock with the Democratic Party. All right. Because they want to put on an act as if they, support women and they support Black people, but it's all performative. It's all symbolic and it's all performative. And when push comes to shove, they do not support you. They are all about, it's about power and a hunger for power. And all they're looking to do is to maintain power. And that's all this is about. All right. So, all right, I gotta keep pushing along because, like I said, we snuck this story in because I just came across it later in my research and didn't have enough time to put together to fit it into the episode today. All right, so sorry to rush through it in a way like that. Hopefully gave it enough time there. Do we have any comments we want to get to? Okay. All right. I think we popped everything up. Thanks to everyone for commenting on that. I saw all your comments and appreciate all the thoughts on that. So thank you to everyone for doing so. Yeah. All right. Next story up. Let me see. All right. This will be another Democrat suck story. Okay. So we got plenty of these for today. All right. One sec again. Okay. So the Democrats just can't stop making this COVID relief bill worse and worse and worse. All right. And please understand, everyone, they are negotiating with themselves here. Okay. So this is the Democrats negotiating with the Democrats. This is not the Republicans. The Republicans have no say in this COVID relief bill. No matter what is in this bill, it will not get a single Republican vote. And so the only way to pass this bill is through a process of an arcane Senate process known as budget reconciliation. Okay. And with that, they can do it with a simple majority, 50 votes, plus Kamala Harris's tie-breaking vote as vice president and president of the Senate. She has the tie-breaking vote. And so all they have to do is just get every Democrat to agree to it. Okay. So anything that comes of this bill the blame must be placed squarely at the feet of Democrats for this. Okay. So they continue to negotiate with themselves and to negotiate working class people out of this, bill, and to just continue to screw over working class folks. All right. And poor and working class folks. All right. So, Biden has now agreed to limit the number of people who will get the $1,400 COVID relief checks. All right. So It was supposed to be $2,000. We were told $2,000 immediately during the Senate, during the Georgia runoffs. I've played the clip of Biden saying $2,000 checks will go out the door immediately, over and over and over again on the show. So if you watch the show enough, you've seen that clip already of Biden saying that repeatedly. John Ossoff, Raphael Warnock, all confirming this, saying multiple times, $2,000 checks, never caveating it, never ever mentioning $1,400 checks, and also saying that it would go out immediately. That was in December, referring to January. January 5th was the runoff elections. They said immediately after that. It's now March, okay? This is 2 months later, all right? We're 2 months after that, and we still have not gotten that relief bill, and it just keeps getting worse, okay? And so there's two, they were negotiating two major hits to the bill. They were also debating whether to lower the amount of the unemployment checks they're planning to increase it to $400 a week. Right now it's $300 a week as an additional federal unemployment benefit. In the House bill, they increased it to $400 a week. It used to be $600 a week at the beginning of the pandemic, and should have never changed from $600 a week. But they are set to raise it to $400 from the $300 that it currently stands at. Those unemployment benefits are due to expire on March 14th. All right. So March 14th, Donald Trump's, COVID relief, unemployment benefits are set to expire. And so the Democrats have a ton of pressure on them to get this bill done before March 14th, which is, again, less than 2 weeks away now. And, in just a handful of days of when the Senate's actually going to be meeting, because they don't meet on weekends or anything like that. OK. So, what they've agreed to is to limit the checks to anyone. It was supposed to phase out so it was $1,400 was supposed to go, after they lowered it to $1,400, that the stimulus, we'll just call it the relief checks were supposed to go, full relief checks were supposed to go to anyone making less than $75,000 a year in 2020. So anyone who made less than $75,000 for the year was due to get a full $1,400 check, and then it phased out over the next 25,000 up to 100,000. All right. That's lower than where it was in previous bills where it was 125,000. All right. So they had already lowered it once coming into this bill. Democrats lowered it themselves in this bill. All right. So they already lowered it to 100,000. And now what they did was they lowered it from 100,000 to 80,000. So now if you get the full check, if you have 75,000, it phases out up to 80,000. So over just a span of $5,000. All right. Which I've never heard of anything that small for a phase out. And then after 80,000, you get nothing. So if you make more than $80,000, you will not receive any, COVID relief check in this upcoming bill. And Biden has now agreed to that. And it looks like that will be the way that the bill gets pushed through the Senate. So, it's $75,000 for individuals, $150,000 for people filing, for married couples filing jointly, and $80,000 is where it phases out for individual filers, and for joint filers, it's $160,000, so double that, right? So, this is a major blow. People are hurting, and the idea. Let's just be clear: $80,000 is. That's a very different amount of money, whether you're living in a rural area or in San Francisco or, Boston, Massachusetts, or Manhattan, New York, right? So the idea that you can just do this foolish means, flat rate means testing not tied to cost of living in an area is utterly absurd. And all it does is hurt people that are hurting, right? It's just people are struggling right now. Yes, folks that I was making $100,000 a year as a software engineer, and I lived paycheck to paycheck. never able to pay off my student. I owe more student loan debt than when I left college. All right. So I didn't even have money to pay my student loan debt. And I was still living paycheck to paycheck. All right. Making six figures. All right. That's why we need to, if anything, if you're going to base this on anything, base it on wealth, not income, right? Because your income can be whatever it is. What matters is wealth, right? How much of that income are you actually able to save, right? Because some people, income only tells one half of the story. Sure, you have that income. What are your expenses? And your expenses, depending on where you live in this country, are wildly different. And I'll tell you, $80,000 in San Francisco or Palo Alto, California, Silicon Valley, $80,000 is like, $40,000, most other places. All right. So it's like, because the cost of living is like twice as high there. All right. So to say $80,000 flat rate, it just ignores the reality of what's going on in this country and really screws over people in urban centers, to be quite honest. So this is just a stupid, just a bad move that stands to, to hurt people. All right. So, people that need the help. All right. So, they say in this, they go on to say that 8 million people who would have received payments under the House bill would lose them under the Senate plan. I've heard estimates as high as 12 million actually. So that 8 million could be as high as 12 million by these estimates. And that's according to a rough estimate from Howard Gleckman, a senior fellow at the Urban Brookings Tax Policy Center, which is like a centrist economic policy center. Even more people are set to receive smaller payments than they would have under the House proposal, he added. Gleckman estimates the changes would save about $15 billion in a nearly $2 trillion piece of legislation. All right. So we are talking about something that is less than 1% of this bill. All right. Less than 1% of the cost to just make sure that a few more people can and many people have stated that the real danger of this COVID relief bill is not doing enough. The danger is not doing too much. All right. And look at how, just pay attention to how they nickel and dime whenever it is poor and working class people set to get something. That's when they all come out with their calculators and they start the nickel and diming and the means testing. But when it was tax breaks for the uber wealthy and for the wealthiest people in this country, people like Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, who have made $100 billion over the course of the pandemic, when it came to those folks, there was no questions asked when we gave them a $6 trillion tax cut in 2017. There was no nickel and diming. Even in the CARES Act of 2020, there was no nickel and diming when we gave $4.5 trillion of essentially dark money to corporations, no strings attached, right? So that was the $500 billion that was leveraged by the Federal Reserve at a 10-to-1 rate or whatever it is, and to make it $4.5 trillion. All right. So they gave corporations and the wealthiest Americans $4.5 trillion. No questions asked, blank check. Just come to us, ask us, just tell us what you need. We got you. But when it comes to poor and working class people, then they got to pull out the calculators and make sure we got to skim that 1% more off of this bill, as if $15 billion matters. We just passed, the Democrats voted to give Trump like an extra $30 billion in his military budget that he didn't even ask for. All right. So they'll give Trump an extra $30 billion. This is how they say, Tupac said, we got money for wars, but can't feed the poor. Right. And this is it. He was, ahead of his time and prescient, right? And it's true. We always got money for wars, but can't feed the poor. I think we fund the Space Force. That is the force. That is the military force meant to apparently fight aliens. Okay, so we give the aliens, the alien fighters, more funding than what this $15 billion here. All right, so miss me with the whole we need to save money here. And these are, again, Democrats negotiating with other Democrats, all right? Not with Republicans. The Republicans are not doing this. They have nothing to do with this. Republicans are horrible. They want to do far worse. They want to give you like a $600 billion bill. So nobody's saying that the Republicans are good in this, or have any moral high ground to stand on. They absolutely don't. They're far worse. But that shouldn't be the bar that we're setting. That that shouldn't be the bar that we're trying to clear. That shouldn't be the standard that we hold ourselves to. We should hold ourselves to a higher standard than the Republican Party. All right, and so. Yeah, this is just an absolute travesty. They were trying to make it even worse than that. We already know that what they're doing with the $15 minimum wage and trying to remove the $15 minimum wage from the bill, which I plan to get into in a story later on if we have time. But I'll just say on that it absolutely, if you raise the minimum wage, what you're doing, it absolutely stands to benefit and have a positive impact on the U.S. deficit and the tax revenues, right? Because if you raise the minimum wage, right, that means that employees across the board are going to be paid more money, and they've done all kinds of scoring on this. The people that claim that jobs are going to be lost, and no, for all the jobs lost by raising the minimum wage, for one, it's offset by people being paid higher wages, right? This is nearly doubling of the minimum wage in many states, right? About 30 states actually already have $15 minimum wages or higher that are slowly going into effect. But in many states, about 21 states, it's still a $7.25 minimum wage, which has been since 2009. And so we're well past due to increase the minimum wage. And the reality is that when you increase the minimum wage, those people pay more taxes, right? You nearly double the money that they're making, double the income. That's nearly double the tax money that those people are going to pay into, right? And then also, when you make more money, you stand to you qualify for less social service programs, right? If you make more money, you don't qualify for food stamps, that SNAP benefits and other social services. And so you end up, the government saves money in that regard as well, right? The money is coming from the private corporations that, have been profiting immensely here. And instead of coming from the government, essentially, right, through social service programs. So you just give those people the money directly, right? And so it's twofold how it impacts how it stands to benefit the tax revenues and the U.S. deficit, right? It's a positive step because the government can collect more money in taxes because people are earning more money, so they pay more taxes. And then two, when you're making more money, you qualify for less social services, and so you need less resources, less spending for the federal government, right? So it's twofold how it benefits, the U.S. government, and it's absolutely absurd to suggest that the minimum wage doesn't stand to benefit people. And we'll I'll get into the minimum wage in just a bit. All right. But yeah, this is frustrating because it's unnecessary. The Democrats are anything that they get into this bill, they're going to have to pass it with 50 votes. It's going to be all Democrats. And to anyone who thinks that, Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema are going to be able to block this legislation, you do not understand politics. If you think that those two senators are going to be able to block this COVID relief bill, I don't care what is in it. All right. They will not be able to vote no against it unless they are willing to end their careers. All right. It's voting no on this bill would mean delaying benefits to tens of millions of Americans, all right, and millions of their constituents, and that is a guaranteed loss for them in their next election. So if they have if they're dumb enough to try to vote no on this COVID relief bill, regardless of what progressive legislation gets put into it, again, that would be career ending. That would be a career-ending vote for any Democratic senator who does not vote in favor of this bill, because you need every single Democratic senator to vote in favor of it in order to pass it. Because again, hear me now, quote me later, not a single Republican will vote in favor of this bill. I don't care how small they make it, how much they strip out of it. It does not stand to benefit. And the people that need it most are in some of these, like Joe Manchin State in West Virginia, Kyrsten Sinema in Arizona. Like those people need it, desperately. And so their constituents need that money and need that relief. And they would be foolish to vote against Joe Biden's bill. Not to mention that Joe Biden, if he really believes in something and truly believes in something, you just use the bully pulpit to bully them. Say, listen, you dare to vote against me, I will come down to your state and I will personally campaign against you in the next election. All right, just like Donald Trump used to do about stupid things that would destroy the working class and poor people. All right, Donald Trump would do that, build that wall, and all that nonsense. And Donald Trump would say, if you don't support building a stupid wall that's going to waste money and do nothing to prevent, the quote unquote illegal immigration, then I'll come down and I'll campaign against you. And that's how you use the bully pulpit of the presidency to apply pressure to these politicians. It's a joke. You can, everybody told us that this is why you need Joe Biden in office. This is why we can't have Bernie Sanders. You need Joe Biden because Joe Biden, he can negotiate and he's a, master legislator, and, he'll work bipartisan, to bring both sides of the aisle together. Well, he's got no Republican support for his bill. So we see how absurd those sort of suggestions are. And, I see people like trying to put blame on Bernie for this, which is just beyond absurd. Bernie has next to nothing to do with this and has been the person championing and fighting for, progressive legislation to be included in this bill. That's including the minimum wage, the $400 a week checks. He's pushed for $600 a week checks, $2,000 recurring checks. We should be talking about recurring COVID relief checks. Why are we, Manchin wanted to limit the checks, stop them in July instead of August. Why are we talking about letting these checks stop until we meet certain economic qualifiers? Like they should build in language into this that just triggers, based on economic thresholds, right? And public health thresholds, until we have X amount of people vaccinated and X amount of unemployment rate in the country, then it stands, right? Like unemployment should be directly tied to the unemployment rate in the country. Like just say we're going to maintain this and we will keep this in place until unemployment falls below a certain level. Why play any other games with having to keep on, putting these arbitrary deadlines on it and then forcing them to come back and renegotiate these things again? All right. So I got to keep pushing along because we got a lot to get to, and I'm hanging up on these stories a little too long here. So let me keep pushing along here. Pull up our next story. Please, if you haven't done so already, hit the like button down below, subscribe to the channel, share this out on social media. We really appreciate the support. And if you can afford to do so, please, please, please support us financially. We need recurring donations in order to keep the show going and in order to grow, really just to keep existing at this stage. Seriously, just to keep existing, we need more recurring donations. But thank you to everyone who does, who has already donated in any way, shape, or form, one time or recurring. Thank you so much for your support. We could not do this without you. Just wouldn't have the motivation, to be quite honest. It's labor, right? People deserve to be paid for their labor. To anyone who thinks like, oh, you're a socialist, why are you asking for money? You're a socialist. Yeah, socialists believe in workers controlling the means of production and being paid their fair share for their labor. So this is absolutely, I'm not asking anything that is misaligned with my ideology. All right. So sorry, I got to do it, but I got to do it because, we need funding to keep going. We're not funded like CNN and MSNBC, who apparently can't cover basic news stories and just bring you the truth and some facts here. So we got to pick up the slack there. All right. Let me see what my next story was. Okay. Biden and the student debt. All right. So I've been talking about this a bit recently because it's an important story to me personally. I mean, I am under the weight of over $80,000 of student loan debt, debt that has only increased since I left college about 4 or 5 years ago. Quick fact: 12% of Black Americans. Never mind. Can't give the facts because I forget it. But I believe it is. The average Black graduate owes 12% more 4 years after graduation. The average white graduate owes 12% less 4 years after graduating on their student loan debt. Okay, so Black Americans are struggling in particular. They have the most debt of any group, Black women in particular, but they hold the highest levels of debt of any demographic. And they also struggle to pay it. Why? Because you're dealing with systemic economic inequality and generational wealth inequality that continues to plague Black communities, as well as Latino and other other groups of color, Indigenous folks, in particular. So, all right. So let me just pull up the story really quickly here. So I want to share. I'm going to share a clip first. This is from Biden's town hall that he did. I believe it was on CNN back in mid-February. It was a couple of weeks ago, but I wanted to play the clip because I didn't get to play the clip on my show, and I think it's important to hear him say the words. And so I wanted to play this clip. One, it just infuriates me, but I think it's also very important to just hear him say it. Hear it from the horse's mouth. This is Joe Biden at a town hall being asked a question about student loan debt in the country, all right, and his plans to solve this problem. And I just want you to keep in mind, I really need you to keep in mind, actually, before I do this, I just need you to keep in mind that Joe Biden is the person who created the student debt crisis. He essentially created the student debt crisis in this country. All right. And now he seemingly refuses to fix it. All right. So you'll find links to this story out of The Guardian in the description box below. But you can see this is a story out of The Guardian. It's titled "How Biden Helped Create the Student Debt Problem He Now Promises to Fix." All right. So this was from before he was elected. And this is saying that he's promising to fix the student debt problem. All right. So the former vice president and 2020 presidential hopeful backed a 2005 bill that stripped students of bankruptcy protections and left millions in financial stress. All right. And he did this to protect credit card companies. All right. So Joe Biden created the student loan debt problem. He's the reason that you can't discharge your student loan debt in bankruptcy. All right. Even indentured servants, they are only indentured for 7 years. All right. And then their debts are just automatically forgiven right after 7 years. With student debt, it's infinite, it's endless indentured servitude. All right, it's until you are stuck with that burden, that albatross around your neck, until the day you are able to pay off every last dime. Okay, and that is thanks to Joseph Robinette Biden. All right. So you have him to thank for that. And so I need you to keep that in mind as you listen to him respond so callously, gaslighting this citizen who asked him this question at the CNN town hall that he did a couple weeks back. All right. So let me play this clip, and I couldn't find it on CNN.com. I had to find it on like an obscure thing because it's really hard to find because they don't want to, for whatever reason, they're not advertising this on CNN. Okay. So here we go.
Loans are crushing my family, friends, and fellow Americans.
Me too.
The American dream is to succeed, but how?
Okay, nope, I'm sorry. I can't even let this pass yet. I can't let this pass. Right out of the gate. That should outrage you, okay? I'm gonna play that one more time. You just got to hear this. I'm sorry. I'll get through this whole clip, I promise, but
loans are crushing my family, friends, and fellow Americans.
Me too.
The American dream is to succeed, but how can
she said student loans are crushing me, my friends, my family, and fellow Americans. And Joe Biden says, me too. All right. No, we won't even say, coincidence of, the other connotations of the Me Too with Joe Biden. But for him to suggest that student loan debt is crushing him and his family is so incredibly insulting, okay? Joe Biden and his family don't have a dime of student loan debt, okay? They don't have a dime of student loan debt. So to suggest that it's crushing you and your family is deeply insulting and is just a form of gaslighting at a massive scale. All right. So that alone should outrage you. All right. That he's sitting there cracking jokes and laughing about a problem he created. All right. And he refuses to fix. He has the authority. And that's another thing to keep in mind, that Joe Biden has the authority with the wave of a pen to sign away with just his signature, to sign away all student loan debt, okay? The federal government holds 99% of student loan debt in the country, all right? And he has the power through executive order to write off all of that debt, all right? Because it's not money that anyone has to go out there and collect or something like that. This isn't, income all right? This is money this is debts that are owed to the federal government, and all they have to do is write on a piece of paper, you know what? Tear up the IOU. You don't owe us anymore. We're all set. We're not going to collect this, barbaric, debt from you. All right. $1.6 trillion in student loan debt, which is more than all the credit card debt in the country combined. All right. All right. Sorry, that part outraged me. I had to say that. I had to stop it. I promise. I'm going to play the whole clip out from here on out. Okay, I promise. And we'll pull it back if we need to for anything else. All right.
Loans are crushing my family, friends, and fellow Americans.
Me too.
The American dream is to
kidding.
succeed, but how can we fulfill that dream when debt is many people's only option for a degree? We need student loan forgiveness beyond the potential $10,000 your administration has proposed. We need at least a $50,000 minimum. What will you do to make that happen?
I will not make that happen. It depends on whether or not you go to a private university or a public university. It depends on the idea that I say to a community, I'm going to forgive the debt, the billions of dollars of debt for people who have gone to Harvard and Yale and Penn and schools. My children, I went to a great school, I went to a state school. But is that going to be forgiven rather than use that money to provide for early education for young children who come from disadvantaged circumstances? But here's what I think. I think everyone, and I've been proposing this for 4 years, everyone should be able to go to community college for free. For free. That costs $9 billion, and we should pay for it. And the tax policies we have now, we should be able to pay for it. You spend almost that much money as a break for people who own racehorses. And I think any family making under $125,000 whose kids go to a state university they get into, that should be.
Okay. So, there is so much to debunk. He told so many lies, just outright lies in that short statement that it's hard to parse through all of them. All right, I should have written something down here. I don't have the notes in front of me here. Give me 1 second. I think I did draw a few. Okay. So some of the things he said. All right. For one, all right, he says, one, she asked him outright, we need at least $50,000 in student debt relief. Let me tell you, it's not enough. You just need to do total debt cancellation. All right. Because by canceling $50,000 in student loan debt, let me tell you, the average Black person holds higher debt than the average white person, okay, in this country. So by canceling less student debt, all right, then you're disproportionately harming Black people and other marginalized groups in particular, but particularly Black people. They hold twice as many as any other group. They are twice as likely to have debt above $60,000. All right. So Black Americans are, again, let me repeat that. Black Americans are twice as likely than any other group to hold over $60,000 in student loan debt. All right. So to say that you're going to cancel $50,000 or less of student loan debt will disproportionately harm Black students. All right. And why do they hold more debt? Because, Black people, other marginalized people are more likely to be poorer, all right? And the poorer you are, the more likely you are to hold larger amounts of student debt. The more money you have, the more likely you are to have taken out less student debt to begin with, or no student debt, or to have been able to pay off that student debt, all right? So you know, if we don't address this issue, all it stands to do is to continue to widen the black-white racial wealth gap, right? Because Black people are just accruing more and more debt, higher debts, and those debts increase over time, while white people are able to take on less debt, and their debts are decreasing on average over time, right? And so white folks are paying off their student loans. Black folks are not. And it's not because Black people are lazy or, you know, anything foolish like that. All right. It's because they don't have money. All right. And so, you know, this idea that, you know, cutting smaller amounts of student debt somehow, you know, is targeted towards the, you know, certain marginalized groups, you know, is absurd, or poorer people. Absurd, right? The next thing that he said, you know, this, you know, he talks about how, like, you know, I'm not going to support, you know, canceling student loan debt for wealthy people. Excuse me? What wealthy person takes on student loan debt? You do not take on student loan debt if you're wealthy, all right? It makes no sense. Student loans have an interest rate of like as high as like 8.5%. No wealthy person in their right mind is going to take out a loan at an 8.5% interest rate when they have the money sitting there in the bank. All right. Well, that's what makes them wealthy, right? Wealth means you have assets, you have money, right? Your assets outweigh your debts. All right. So that means that you got money in the bank, right? And so the idea that wealthy people or rich people are the ones that are holding debt is just stupid. It's just stupid and false. All right. Wealthy people don't take on debt in the first place. They just pay for college and you know, straight up, right? So they just pay for their higher education. And you know, and if they do take on debt, they're more capable of paying that debt off. All right. So, you know, this idea that, oh, canceling less debt is somehow more targeted for the poorer people or the people that need it more is utterly absurd. All right. And just use me as an example, as an anecdotal example. I told you I hold $80,000 in student loan debt. And I'm sorry, but, you know, canceling 50 just ain't gonna cut it for me. All right. I'm still gonna be sitting there with $30,000 of student loan debt that I cannot pay. All right. Not with the, you know, I can't work in my industry right now because of, you know, I've told you in the past, you know, racial discrimination that I face, you know, in the tech industry has pushed me out of the industry that I was trained to be in, you know, and you're going to turn around and tell a Black person that's trying to make a living as an independent journalist that I need to pay off $80,000 in student loan debt. You tell me that's my student loan payments. If I don't defer them, they're over $1,000 a month. Like just that, I would not be able to do this show. Again, this is how they get us as indentured servants. All right. I am forced to work in that industry because I'm going to be forced back into that industry, in an industry that I'm not comfortable in, you know, that harms my mental health, you know, because I need to pay off the student loan debt. All right. In this job, unless we raise a whole lot more money, links in the description box below, coffee.com/radical democracy. Please help a brother pay off some of this $80,000 in student loan debt. You know, contribute whatever you can, especially if you're somebody that you know, has been able to pay off your debt or doesn't hold that debt, but attended college, you know, for whatever reason, you know, help a brother out, right? You know, but that's the reality, is that, you know, that's a rent payment. All right. Over $1,000 a month. That's rent. That's a mortgage, right? That's a mortgage payment. That could be the difference between me owning a home and not owning a home. And this is why, again, if we you know, alleviate student debt, it overall, it will have a stimulating effect on the economy, because people that would be just giving that money back to the government to go give away to rich people in future tax breaks, instead of giving that money away to the government, can pay for services, local services in their community, support small businesses, make these big ticket purchases like homes and cars. You know, that stuff isn't even an option, isn't even on my radar right now, because of student loan debt. All right. It's just this massive burden that weighs around my neck that follows me everywhere. And I constantly have to think about, you know, and it's not just me. It's not just me. I just use myself as an example because I'm just one of many, of countless examples. All right, of folks that are struggling, and it's just one way. It's not the end all be all. It's not the only way to help black folks or anything like that, but it's one way. It's one way to help out, marginalized people, to help out, black folks in particular, and to help out poor folks in general, right? Just broadly speaking, the people that are holding the debts disproportionately are the poorer people in society, right? So from a class, on a class basis, it's helping people. And he's talking about, anyone making less than $125,000 a year. And trust me, if they start $125,000, just like with the COVID relief, rest assured, it will keep getting knocked down lower and lower and lower. All right. So, I'm somebody that was making 100,000, stood to make more than 120,000, but income is different. Some people are able to make less money, but they have generational wealth and they're doing just fine. They're able to take on jobs with lesser pay because they have wealth in their family and they don't have the same kind of concerns, right? So these student debt keeps us indentured, in indentured servitude, essentially endlessly. It feels like, honestly. I mean, many people, there are people, 60 years and above that have had student loan debt for 30 years now that are still unable to pay it off. So acting like this is just a young person's problem or anything like that is just, it's just, not accurate, all right, and not based in reality. And we all need this relief, and it's just one of many forms of relief, but it is a very doable form of relief, and it's something that can be done with the wave of a pen. To anyone who doesn't support that, I just think you are woefully mistaken on this issue. When folks come in and argue against student loan debt relief as if it's going to disproportionately, as if it's some classist policy that did, to people that point out that, well, less black people, go to college and maybe that's because the cost is so damn high, right? That people, it's an obstacle to attending college, all right? And if we took that obstacle away, and then he talks about how he supports, free community college, how everyone should have the ability to go to community college for free. Well, guess what, buddy? I'm sorry, but there aren't enough community colleges in the country for everyone to go to community college, all right? That's absurd. That's foolish, all right? The only acceptable thing is that all public colleges are free, all right? All public colleges should be free, all right? If they want to make private colleges and charge people money for their private colleges, go ahead. I don't care. I'm fine if they want to ban that and don't want to allow that stuff, but I'm fine if they want to leave it. Leave it. Let people have private colleges. You can choose, as long as there are enough public colleges that it can cover every single person in the country, all right, for free, all right? No debt. You should leave college with no debt, totally free. Tuition, board for college should be totally covered. And for graduate programs, you should even be paid a stipend like they do in many European countries. They don't just, it's not just free. They pay you money to go to grad school in Germany, in the Scandinavian countries, all right, in France, all right? So, we could be doing a hell of a lot more and a hell of a lot better. And Joe Biden has the power to do it and simply refuses to. All right. Every day that passes is a day that he simply refuses to just sign his name on a piece of paper and erase $1.6 trillion of immoral debt over, students. Why should we pay such exorbitant prices for our education? Nobody expects. Does anybody complain about rich people getting free high school? Rich people all have access to free high school because public, schools are free up until high school. Rich people have access to that. Guess what? Rich people don't go to public schools, all right? They go to private schools, all right? So the idea that all these rich people are going to be going to these public schools and getting all this benefit is just absurd, all right? Make all public colleges free, first off, and then cancel all debt and make sure that we never, ever allow this to happen again. But, Joe Biden has a corrupt interest in maintaining the student loan debt. He is literally the person who created the student loan debt problem. And now he turns around and he spits and laughs in our face while gaslighting all of us about, debts and acting like him and his family are somehow hurting from this. You don't know what hurting is, all right? You don't know what hurting is, all right? All right, woosah. Gotta collect myself after that one. Anytime I talk about this issue, it's so hard not to get upset, about it. I mean, it affects me personally, absolutely. So yes, I have a personal interest in this, but it's so much more than that. It affects so many Americans, millions of Americans, tens of millions of Americans, and we deserve this relief. There's no reason why we should have ever taken on these debts in the first place, and they'll never be able to repair the damage that they've done to people's mental health and other financial situations. And we should look to make amends for that in every way and atone for that in every way possible. I believe in canceling medical debt, all kinds. I want to see housing debt canceled. Like, I don't believe that anyone should be holding housing debt. And and in all those forms. So if your argument is like, oh, well, I have mortgage, and I paid for my student debt, that's like saying like, oh, well, this coronavirus has already killed 500,000 Americans. My family member died from coronavirus. Nobody should get a vaccine because my family and I didn't get a vaccine in time. So nobody should get a vaccine. No, that's absurd. We should absolutely, stop the bleeding, so to speak, and try to correct the mistake moving forward, and then do whatever we can to repair the harms of the past as well. And I would 100% support all of those initiatives. But there's one thing that Joe Biden absolutely can do immediately. Every single day he wakes up, he makes a calculated decision not to do it, and that is to cancel all student loan debt. And he absolutely has the power to do so, and is simply not doing it because of his corrupted, interest, corrupt special interests, that places that he's taken money from his entire career. Those credit card companies, they all stand, in these debtors stand to benefit from holding this debt over people, and private employers stand to benefit because it forces people into these capitalist enterprises, private capitalist enterprises, where they're continually exploited even further, and it forces you into that situation, right? You just don't have a choice to go and create your small business. They talk about innovation and how capitalism allows for innovation, but you can't innovate. You can't be innovative, when you're stuck with all this debt. You got to go and work for a check, and you got to be earning the check. And so you can't build up your little small business and operate at a loss like Amazon or Microsoft or Google or, Tesla or any of these massive companies can do, right? The little people, the mom and pop stores are disproportionately burdened in that system. All right. Okay. Keep pushing along. All right. Minimum wage. Yep. Let's do minimum wage stuff, because this is a really relevant topic, and got a lot to say about this. And then hopefully we'll have time to get into some foreign policy stuff, as well. All right. Okay, I'm just trying to find. Okay. Sorry. Just 1 second while I pull up this story. Okay. All right. So two Democratic senators, Joe Manchin of West Virginia and Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona, have come out in opposition to a $15 minimum wage that slowly increases, gradually increases over the next 5-year period. All right. All the way until 2025. All right. So, this is a $15 minimum wage, which wouldn't fully take effect until 2025, when by that time, according to economist Richard Wolff, by 2025, $15 will be able to buy you as much as $13.80 can buy you right now today. Okay. So due to inflation of 2 to 3% yearly inflation that happens, routinely 2 to 3% inflation every year, historically. And according to that pattern, if that pattern holds, which it will, or could be worse, if that pattern holds, it will, $15 in 2025 will buy you as much as $13.80. So having a $15 minimum wage by 2025 is akin to having a $13.80 minimum wage today. Okay. So, we've been talking about a $15 minimum wage since, 2015. We've been talking about a $15 minimum wage and gradually enacting that over the following 5 years, which would have been up until 2021. We should have by now, if Bernie Sanders won that first election, we would have a $15 minimum wage right now today. All right. And so, these senators they make $174,000 a year. All right. Joe Manchin, Kirsten Sinema, every single senator and every single congressperson, right? So every member of the House of Representatives and the Senate make $174,000 a year. All right. So these are people, I did the math out. All right. For what is $174,000 a year? If these people were working full time, 40 hours a week, 52 weeks a year, which let me tell you, they do not work. The Senate is only in session 100 and some odd days. All right. That's the amount of days that they actually are required to work. It's like 100 days. It's literally less than half of the average working person they are required to work each year. All right. Because they take all these kind of breaks and recesses, all right, supposedly to go back into campaign in their state, but they don't have to because of all the other, advantages that they have as incumbents. All right. They don't even do that. All right. And so they most of their time is spent, half of their time is spent, calling to fundraise for more money from wealthy donors. All right. That's literally how half of their time is spent cold calling for the average senator and congressperson. Right. And so these people make $174,000 a year. I did the math. That works out to, at full time, if they were working the same as a working person, that would be $85 an hour. Okay. So we are paying these Congress people $85 an hour to deny the rest of us a $15 an hour minimum wage. All right. That is disgusting. All right. It's disgusting. All right. And it's absurd. And the thing is, and the way that I feel is that any person with the audacity to tell us that, these senators, these Congress people, they should have to, if you don't support raising the minimum wage, they should be forced to live on a minimum wage for the entirety of their careers. All right. If you believe that the minimum wage is enough for a person to sustain themselves in this country, then you show us that. You prove it to us. Prove it to us that somebody can survive on less than, if you make $7.25 an hour, that is less than you work full time, 40 hours a week, you are below the poverty line in the United States. Okay. You are considered poor. You are living in poverty. All right. If you make less than $15 an hour in right now. All right. So if you're making like it's literally I think less than $14 or $13 an hour, you are below the poverty line. All right. At $13 or $14 an hour right now. Okay. You're living below the poverty line, working full time. I'm sorry, but nobody working full time in any place in the world should be living in poverty. All right. Nobody who works 40 hours a week, which is already absurdly, why 40 hours? Why not 30 hours a week? Why is 40 hours considered full time? In some countries, it's 32 or 35 hours. Here in the US, 40 hours a week. Right. And you're talking about paying people $7.25 an hour, which works out, by the way, to about $15,000 a year before taxes. Okay. After taxes, it's less than $10,000 a year after taxes. All right. I'm sorry, but you tell me, where is that a living wage? Where is that that is $15 an hour isn't a dignified living wage. It's survival wages. We're talking about paying people enough money just to scrape by. All right. Just to scrape by. All right. So, I wasn't planning to do this, but I'll actually pull up. Yeah. So I'll pull up this map. I shared it before, but I'll share it one more time because I think it's so just an eye-opening, and very vivid picture of what it would require, what the minimum wage. So this is a map, of what the minimum wage would need to be in each state in order for a person to afford a 2-bedroom house without spending more than 30% of their yearly income, which by all types of global measures that they've done, they say if your income, if your rent exceeds 30% of your income, it's not sustainable. You're going to end up owing in other places of your life. All right. Because of all the other expenses outside of that. Right. For cost of living expenses. Right. So here is a a map of that. All right. And you can see here, they have, just I'll call some of these states. So for instance, in West Virginia, where Joe Manchin is, it would cost you would need a minimum wage of at least $14.27 for you to afford the fair market rent for a 2-bedroom rental home without paying more than 30% of your income, working full-time, 52 weeks a year, 40 hours a week. And this is from the National Low Income Housing Coalition. All right. They're at nlihc.org. Okay. And here where I am in Massachusetts, it's $33.81. All right. To afford the fair market rent for a 2-bedroom rental home here in Massachusetts. All right. On average, would require the minimum wage to be $33.81. Our minimum wage here is $15, and it's gradually working to $15. Right now, it's $12.50. All right. So it's not even $15 yet. It's working its way up to $15. All right. And that isn't even half of what it would take for you to afford a 2-bedroom rental home. All right. And if you ask me, a 2-bedroom rental home for a single person is really the bare minimum to me, because that gives you a room and an office space, especially in today's economy where you're expected to work remotely for so many people. You need more space than just a 1-bedroom. That's just not enough space for a person to live. All right. So 2-bedroom is really like the bare minimum for me, for a single person. And they can't afford it, much less if you're a family. All right. In Arizona, where Kirsten Sinema is and says that she doesn't support a $15 minimum wage, it's $19.52 would need to be the minimum wage in order to support this. In California, $34.69. Okay. So, and you can take a look at your state, here on this map, and you'll see how absurd that is. All right. So, all right. And so I want to, just show you that, raising the minimum wage, stands to, to improve people's lives, across the board. And it's better for the government, less spending that you have to do to support people with social services, because they actually make enough money. And it's just absurd that these two senators, now they are not the ones, let me tell you. So I just want to be clear about this. So while those two have come out and signal that they plan to fight against this, they do not really have the power to block this legislation. All right. And so we're going to take a look at a couple of things that really highlight this. But first, before we go any further, I just want to show this quick thing. This is a study by the Economic Policy Institute, and they did the study on the impact of raising the wage for workers in 2021, and so let me show you where we're getting these numbers from. For the title, this isn't that story yet, Tammy, just so you know. I'm going to do that one next. I'll do that one in just a sec. Yep. So from this story out of the Economic Policy Institute, a economic think tank. So they say, this is the impact of raising the minimum wage to $15 by 2025 by congressional district. Okay. And so they talk about, how the minimum hourly wage is just $7.25, and it has not increased since 2009. The Raise the Wage Act of 2021, introduced in the House of Representatives, would gradually raise the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour by 2025. And they say that Economic Policy Institute research shows that raising the federal minimum wage to $15 an hour by 2025 would lift pay for nearly 32 million workers across the country. That's 21% of the U.S. workforce. Okay. So it stands to lift the pay of 1 in every 5 workers in the country. All right. This is as we're going to see in a second, a wildly popular policy. All right. That stands to help over 30 million Americans. All right. And they say that the increases would provide an additional $107 billion in wages for the country's lowest paid workers, with the average affected worker who works year round receiving an extra $3,300 a year. Okay. So they also have this map here that shows like different areas of the country and how it would impact those different areas. So the darker you see, the greater the increase in the minimum wage in that area. And so you can really see, here, some of these states, especially the southern states, really stand to benefit immensely from an increase of $15 an hour. Places like Massachusetts, where it's less because they've already enacted that minimum wage. But I would argue that once you lift the minimum wage, it's not going to just lift the people that are working at minimum wage. Many of our wages are based on are relative to the minimum wage where we live. Like they'll say, okay, we pay you more than minimum wage. So if they raise the minimum wage, and you're making more than minimum wage right now, I doubt that they're just going to leave you at that wage. They are very likely to raise your wage to say, okay, well, you weren't supposed to be a minimum wage worker. You deserve, say 10% above the minimum wage, 20% above the minimum wage, 100% above the minimum wage, right? If you make twice as much as the minimum wage. So we all stand to benefit from this. Even if you're not a minimum wage worker, you should still support this. Also, you should support this because it helps all of us when people in our communities have more money. It stands to help all of us, right? When people in our communities have more money, then they can spend more money in the community. They are less likely to be destitute, less likely to go homeless, less likely to require social services to support them. And can just live better, dignified lives, right? So it's worth it in every way, shape, or form, and we should absolutely support it. And as you're going to see, actually, so for the next story up that I wanted to talk about was just to show. I just wanted to show how populists are, because one of the lines out of these Democrats that have been claiming, these so-called moderate or blue dog Democrats, what they're claiming is that it would hurt them in their home states if they support a $15 minimum wage. That's going to hurt them with their constituents somehow, right? A $15 minimum wage, it's going to hurt politically. It's somehow a political that it will cause them political harm to support a $15 minimum wage. So let's see what the reality is, and how popular this policy actually is. So this is a story out of Vox poll, and this is from February 24th, 2021. All right, there's a very recent poll that was done, and it says, poll, 61% of likely voters. All right, that's all voters, not just Democrats. All right, that's Republicans, Independents, Democrats. 61% of likely voters support Democrats' gradual minimum wage hike. All right, they say raising the minimum wage is a widely popular idea. A new Data for Progress / Vox poll confirms, but the exact specifics of how it's raised and by how much change that support. So in the poll, 57% of likely voters said they support raising the federal minimum wage from $7.25 per hour to $15 per hour. That support rises to 61% when the details of the Democrats' Raise the Wage Act, gradually increasing the minimum wage to $15 by 2025 and then indexing it to median income. That's another important factor of this Raise the Wage Act, is that it then ties the minimum wage to the median income so that it will at least rise over time. They should tie it to inflation and cost of living. It's absurd to tie it to income, because when you tie it to income, it just incentivizes companies to pay people less so that they have a lower minimum wage. Okay, so this is a stupid way to tie it to median income, is stupid. All right, and backwards way of thinking, it should be tied to the economic factors that matter. How much does it cost to live where you exist? That's the only thing that should matter. All right. Tie it to cost of living, period. Anywho, they said when that's included, it increases and it increases to 62% when voters were asked if they support the gradual increase being a provision of the broader pandemic relief bill. So 62% of 3 out of every 5 voters, Republican, Democrat. The numbers for Democrats, it's even high. It's like 87% for Democrats. All right, and this is who's in power. All right, this is who we elected. All right, nearly 90% of Democratic voters are support this, raising the wage, minimum wage through the Raise the Wage Act, through this COVID relief bill that they're doing now, right? They say, but when asked if they support one party using a quote non-standard procedure, Democrats' use of budget reconciliation in this case, though the poll did not specify on either count, to pass the gradual minimum wage increase, support slipped. So mind you, they did not specify that it was budget reconciliation. They just said a non-standard procedure, all right? So this is a really right-wing framing of this question, all right? So they framed it in one of the harshest ways possible to say, oh, do you want Democrats to use a non-standard procedure? I'm sorry, but this is a totally standard procedure, which has been used repeatedly, multiple. It was used in 2017 with the Republicans to pass a $6 trillion, tax cut for the wealthiest people in the country. All right, so to say that it's non-standard, it was used twice by Republicans under Trump. All right, so they used it twice under Trump. That's a once every 2-year average. That sounds pretty standard as far as Senate processes go to me. All right. So, it was used by Bush to do the Bush tax cuts. All right. So whenever they're trying to ram through really harmful policies that benefit the wealthiest people in the country and harm the poorest and marginalized people in the country, they have no problem using these non-standard procedures. All right. And they didn't explain to people what the non-standard procedure was or give them any of that information. They simply called it a non-standard procedure, at which point the support slipped to 49% supported through the non-standard. All right. So that support drops to just 39% of independents and third-party voters and 24% of Republicans, though 79% of Democratic voters gave their party the go-ahead. So 4 out of every 5 Democratic voters said, even if it's a non-standard procedure, we still want you to do this, okay? That is what you call wildly popular, in particular amongst Democratic voters, all right? Amongst people that are likely Democratic voters. This is wildly, massively popular, overwhelmingly popular. So to say that this is somehow going to harm you politically is absurd, all right? Totally absurd. This is an immensely popular policy that only benefits people and the politicians, all right? And the only reason to not do this is to protect corporations, period. All right, that's all I got to say on that note, I believe. I just want to make one more point about the so before we end the conversation on minimum wage, I just want to point out one more thing about this debate, because this is another important point. A tactic that they're trying to use. They're trying to misinform folks about this, and I do not want to let them get away with this misinformation. And Joe Biden is claiming that he supports the $15 minimum wage, but if it just weren't for the Senate parliamentarian, who ruled that it ruled that advised that the Democrats not include the $15 minimum wage as a part of the COVID relief bill. So the Senate parliamentarian, if you have never heard of that position, don't feel bad, all right? Neither did most of us, all right? Neither did I really until the Democrats started talking about them. I never heard about the Senate parliamentarian when Donald Trump was president or George Bush was president. Never heard about the Senate parliamentarian. But all of a sudden, when the Democrats are in power, all of a sudden, this unelected, undemocratic, official, all right? So this is not a democratically elected official. This is somebody appointed by the Senate, all right? So not democratically elected. This is not a senator. This is just some bureaucrat who is, stands in the way of 32 million Americans getting a pay raise. That is the opposite of democracy. When 80% of people, supported in the Democratic Party. 60%, the vast majority of people across the country, Democrat, Republican, Independent, all people, 61% support that. In a democracy, if we had a true democracy, that policy would already be enacted, all right? Because it should take 50% plus one, all right, for democracy, all right? That's democracy. All right, if one more than 50% supports it, that should be the law, right? That's democracy, according to everything that we've defined it as. And so, you got 60% of people supporting this, and one person in the country, an unelected official, saying that she could somehow rule against this. Unfortunately for the Democrats who wanted to use that for cover and use that as an excuse, their excuse pretty quickly fell apart when people simply looked at the history and looked at the precedent for this. So this is an article by David Sirota in his, Substack, the Daily Poster. And it says a secret memo that was circulating around Congress shows how Harris must now advance minimum wage hike. All right. So despite a Senate official's roadblock, the vice president, Kamala Harris, can clear a path to fulfill Dems' $15 minimum wage promise, according to a blueprint circulating on Capitol Hill. And this article is from February 25th. All right. So recent article. So on Thursday, a key Senate official advised Democratic lawmakers that the chamber's rules do not allow them to include a minimum wage increase in President Joe Biden's first COVID-19 relief legislation. The ruling from the parliamentarian means that Vice President Kamala Harris could decide the fate of one of the Democratic Party's most significant campaign promises, but it remains unclear what she will end up doing. As the presiding officer of the Senate, Harris, I keep calling her the president of the Senate. She's the presiding officer of the Senate. I apologize. Okay. So as the presiding officer of the Senate, Harris, who has long touted her support for a $15 minimum wage, can now use the power her predecessors have used to ignore the advisory opinion and fulfill Biden's campaign promise to boost the wage. A confidential memo obtained by the Daily Poster, now circulating on Capitol Hill, spells out exactly how that could be accomplished. However, White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain, one of the authors of Biden's racist crime bill, White House Chief of Staff Ron Klain this week declared that Harris will refuse to use that power, a decision that would effectively put the Biden-Harris administration in the position of potentially killing the prospect of minimum wage legislation for the foreseeable future. Immediately after the parliamentarian's ruling, the White House issued a statement reiterating Klain's comments, declaring that, quote, Biden respects the parliamentarian's decision. Some congressional Democrats have already begun arguing that Biden administration's refusal to overrule the parliamentarian would be immoral and a political disaster for their party. All right. So here's a quote from progressive Democratic representative in the House of Representatives, Pramila Jayapal. She says, it's been 12 years since we've raised the minimum wage. And if we're going to make those promises, we have to be able to deliver on them. Because I'll tell you what, in 2 years, when people vote in the midterms, you're not going to be able to say, well, I'm sorry, we couldn't raise the minimum wage because the parliamentarian ruled that we couldn't do it. That's not gonna fly. All right. So it is clear that Kamala Harris has full authority to overrule the opinion of this unelected, bureaucrat, the Senate parliamentarian. Her name is Elizabeth McDonough. Who she is isn't important. All right. Because whoever she is, if it wasn't her, they would do it with another person. All right. Whoever they had, they were going to use them to try to hide behind this, to try to use procedure. All right. To hide behind procedure. But these are the same people, and we're going to hopefully cover this story in a bit. But these are the same people that just bombed Syria without congressional approval. All right. So somehow you're okay not following the rules, not following the procedure when it comes to bombing some brown people, over in some other country. You don't have to follow procedure and rules. You're not so concerned about norms, democratic norms, in that case. But all of a sudden, now you're concerned about procedure when it comes to giving poor people a pay raise. All of a sudden now we're so concerned about procedure. Hassan Mendoza comments and says, I don't trust Kamala Harris. She tends to lie a lot and backpedal on different issues. Remember, she dropped the support for Medicare for all once she was pressured by other establishment Democrats. 100%, Hassan, 100%. And we've talked about that ad nauseum on the show, and called out Kamala Harris for all of the lies and attacks on poor, working class, marginalized Black communities in particular. That she's done, and she is not a person of the people. She is not as progressive as the liberal media paints her. All right, and we got to call this out and call attention to this. She is the person in power. She absolutely has full power to overrule and override the Senate parliamentarian. And I don't want to get into all the arcane, procedural things. If she overrules them, then it would take 60 votes in the Senate to override her overruling, all right, of the parliamentarian, which cannot happen. That would mean every single Republican plus 10 Democrats would have to vote. Right now, at most they have 2 Democrats that are against this, all right? So Manchin and Sinema, you're not going to get 10 Democrats to and under no circumstance would any Democrats be voting against, Joe Biden if he comes out and says, I want this done. All right. So they simply do not have a will to fight for this. And they do not really want a $15 minimum wage. Joe Biden does not truly support a $15 minimum wage. And if you remember back in the primaries, this was the one concession that Bernie Sanders got from Joe Biden when he gave him his endorsement, was that he got Joe Biden to concede that he would support a $15 minimum wage hike, immediately, ASAP, right? And that he would fight for that. This is not what fighting for a $15 minimum wage looks like. All right. This is what rolling over because you want to feign as if you support a $15 minimum wage, but don't really want to actually do it. All right. And we covered, Joe Biden in his interview with Nora, what's her name? Like Nora O'Donnell, I believe, or Nora O'Connell on CBS, where he, said, oh, I'm just sorry. I don't think that the $15 minimum wage is going to make it. I just don't think it's going to make it into the bill. I'm sorry. You don't talk like that when you actually believe in something and want to fight for something. All right. You say it's going to go in there. Like Bernie Sanders has been saying from the outset, he's been saying, listen, it's going in there no matter what you want to do. We're going to fight for that thing to be in there, and we're not taking no for an answer, right? But you got folks like Cenk Uygur and TYT out here talking about running this hashtag don't kill it Bernie, laying the blame at Bernie's feet as if he's the one with the power to do this right now. Like he is, as the head of the Senate Budget Committee. Now he will have the say about what gets put into the bill initially, but if they strip it out and through the other procedural arrangements during the debate on the COVID relief bill, he has no power over that. The only person that right now has all the authority, there are 2 people who have all the authority to ensure that the $15 minimum wage, it makes it into the COVID relief bill. And that's Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. And I've talked about this before, but I'll just make it clear one more time that the only way that the $15 minimum wage is passed is if it's included as a part of budget reconciliation, which can only happen under this COVID relief bill and maybe in one other bill that will be passed in the fall. All right. So there are maybe 2 chances under this Congress to get this bill passed. And that's right now. And that's in the fall. All right. And then after that, trust me. And the thing is, after the first 100 days, we're already going to switch into midterm election mode. All right. So they're going to stop talking about what Joe Biden needs to be doing. And they're going to start to use those excuses of like, oh, sorry, guys, you can't push Joe Biden too hard. We got midterm elections coming up. We can't call them out too much. We can't put too much pressure on them because it's going to help the Republicans. All right. So here we are telling them right now, support a popular policy because and just like Pramila Jayapal said, this will be catastrophic for Democrats in the midterm elections if they do not pass a $15 minimum wage. All right. Now they must pass it now. All right. Or this will be catastrophic and Republicans will be almost guaranteed to take control of the Senate back. All right. Because all they're going to do is come out and they're going to say, look, you didn't do anything, and so it's really, really absurd to be out there placing blame at Bernie's feet when we know exactly who has the power. It's Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, and to some lesser extent Joe Manchin and Kirsten Sinema. All right, but let's not even pretend like they really have the authority to block this thing. They are going to vote for the COVID relief bill, because if you vote against this COVID relief bill as a Democratic senator and block this bill from happening, that is political suicide. All right. That is political malpractice, and you will absolutely be destroyed in your next election. All right. If you prevent hundreds of millions of people from getting relief because you didn't want to give people a pay raise in the middle of a pandemic, you didn't want to give essential workers a pay raise in the middle of a pandemic. And to anyone who thinks that this isn't germane or relevant in a COVID relief bill, raising the minimum wage, tell that to all the essential workers out there working for the minimum wage. You go out there and you work for $7.25 an hour in the middle of a pandemic that's killed 500,000 Americans, and tell me about how, it's not germane to the bill, according to something called the Byrd Rule in the Senate, which is what the Senate parliamentarian is trying to hide this behind. It's absurd. Also trying to say that it doesn't impact the federal budget. Absurd. Raising the minimum wage absolutely impacts the federal budget. And we talked about it earlier. There are two ways that it impacts the federal budget. If you increase people's wages, then the U.S. government stands to raise more revenues through taxes, right? Because more people get paid more, they have higher income, they pay higher taxes. Right, they pay more taxes, right, and so more people will be paying more taxes because there's more income for them to take taxes out of. And then two, many people will not need to rely on social programs like food stamps, SNAP benefits, meals, other social services and social programs that provide benefits to subsidize housing, things like that, to low income workers, right, or people, poor and low wage workers, right. So, this absolutely has a net benefit for the U.S. deficit and stands to impact. And I mean, look at what the Republicans were able to get through in budget reconciliation. A tax cut for the richest people. They said it would trickle down on us. Essentially, that's the rich people were going to pee all over us apparently, and it would trickle down onto us. And that's how it would benefit us. And somehow, tax cuts for the wealthy. Sure, that fits right in. Minimum wage increase for the poorest. Struggling amongst us. No, that's too much. All right. Moving along here, all right. We're at the nearly 2.5 hour mark, and I don't want to push this too long because the longer I do it, ton of editing to do, and I know folks can't hang too long, right? But I want to try to get through as many stories, and I definitely want to cover some foreign policy here. So let me jump into a couple other stories here, and we'll just see what we have time for. All right. So let's see. All right. Okay. So, and Hassan Mendoza comments and says, I agree with Pramila Jayapal. The Dems will definitely lose the House in the midterms next year if they don't include the $15 minimum wage in the COVID relief package. I absolutely believe. Listen, they stand to lose the Senate. Even if they do pass minimum wage, even if they do, there's still a chance that they could still lose the Senate if history just bears out, because it is common in midterm elections after, for the opposition party to gain seats in midterm elections. All right. And you have to go back to, to like the 90s, FDR and times like that to see examples of it not happening. And again, why did that happen? Because they were passing wildly populist legislation. And that's the only way you stave off that historic precedent, right? Is to pass big, bold, sweeping legislation that helps, poor working class people. All right. And so you can hear me now, quote me later. They are pretty much guaranteed to lose the Senate, to lose control of the Senate if they do not pass the $15 minimum wage. And don't think that the point is missed on me, that may be intentional. All right, that could be intentional, that they don't seem to be serious about wanting to maintain that power because it's a built-in excuse for them when they're not in total control over Congress. Right? I don't think they wanted or expected to have full control of Congress. But this is why voters in Georgia and all across the country, went out there and risked their lives and risked their safety to vote in Democrats, to vote for Joe Biden, was to get this stuff done. And if they don't get it done, they have absolutely failed the American people, and they will deserve to lose in 2022. All right. But it is pretty much a foregone conclusion that if they do not pass the $15 minimum wage, that they will lose in the midterms. And the idea that they can pass the $15 minimum wage as a separate standalone bill is foolish. Okay, it's foolish. It's naive. It's childish. It's disconnected from reality. In order to pass a $15 minimum wage in a standalone bill, you would have to get every single Democrat plus 10 Republicans to vote for it. Not gonna happen. Not a single Republican is gonna vote for a $15 minimum wage increase. Not gonna happen. All right. So there are some Republicans that don't even believe in having any minimum wage. All right. Much less to increase the minimum wage, much less to increase it to $15 an hour. All right. Whew. All right. Okay, so let's talk some foreign policy. Like I quoted him earlier, as the late great Tupac said, it's funny when it rains, it pours. We got money for wars, but can't feed the poor. They say there ain't no hope for the youth, but the truth is there ain't no hope for the future. And then they wonder why we crazy, right? But there it is. We got money for wars, but can't feed the poor, right? And that seems to be the case in America. We always seem to find money for wars, but can't feed the poor. Can't give a $15 pay raise, to minimum wage workers, essential workers in the middle of a pandemic. But we got money to drop bombs on Syria, apparently. So, the empire, continues. U.S. empire. In an act of U.S. imperialism, U.S. militarism, Joe Biden bombed Syria, and 22 people were killed. I've heard reports, but I do not have anything that can confirm this. It was printed, I believe, in a mainstream outlet, CNN or AP News or Reuters had reported that 12 civilians had died in this attack, and then they retracted that statement. Listen, we always find out later on, in some obscure, report that gets released, or a whistleblower will whistleblow. We'll find out through WikiLeaks or some other means. We'll find out that those 22 people that were killed, some amount of them were civilians. All right, and so 22 people were killed. We don't know who they were. All right. In an illegal bombing by Joe Biden in Syria. All right. So let me just play. I'm going to play two clips. First clip is going to just be a little bit of a preview about it. I guess a review of it. And then we're going to hear from Ro Khanna, sitting congressman, Justice Democrat, on his position on this. And he'll tie it to the minimum wage issue as well for us. All right. So let's just play this first clip.
The Biden administration is facing intense criticism after U.S. Air Force fighter jets bombed eastern Syria Thursday. The Pentagon claimed the strikes targeted Iranian-backed militant groups. The London-based Syrian Observatory for Human Rights reports at least 22 people died. Biden ordered the airstrike on the same day he spoke with the King of Saudi Arabia, Iran's arch rival in the region. According to the White House, Biden committed on the call to helping Saudi Arabia defend its territory from Iranian-aligned groups. The Pentagon called the assault a response to recent rocket attacks on U.S. forces in northern Iraq. Those attacks came more than a year after Iraq's parliament voted to expel U.S. troops, an order that's been ignored by both Trump and Biden. On Friday, Biden was asked about the airstrikes.
Mr. President, what message would you send to Iran with your first military action? You can't act with impunity. Be careful.
Still with us is
Okay, so Biden says at the end there his message to Iran. Somebody asked him, "What's your message to Iran on this?" Because he says that this attack in Syria, which we have no authority, it is an illegal bombing. We have no authorization. In order for a president to attack another country, all right, to bomb another country, they need what is called an authorized use of military force. And for the past what is it now? I lose count. It's about 20 years now, okay? For the past 20 years, since 2001, the past 20 years, we have been using the same authorization for use of military force that George Bush got for Iraq, all right? So that's the same authorization for use of military force that they're claiming to have the authority to bomb all these countries on for the past 20 years, all right? It's illegal because the president does not have unilateral authority to just bomb a country. He has to get congressional approval in order to, in what they call an authorized use of military force, AUMF, in order to bomb a country. And he did not seek this authorized use of military force, and he did not receive any approval from Congress on this. He would not have received approval. I would hope he would not have received approval to bomb a sovereign country and to claim that it was an attack against, Iranian-backed militia forces, all right? So there's just so many layers to this that make no sense and are completely absurd and only destabilize the region and stand to make us less safe here and to jeopardize our national security here. All right. So before I go on, though, let me just play a clip from Ro Khanna, a sitting congressman. He is the congressman out of New York, I believe. California. I believe it's their 17th district. It's the district that Silicon Valley is in. So, a pretty high profile district. And here's him speaking. He's a progressive Democrat, member of the Justice Democrats, and this is him responding to the attacks, just sharing his thoughts on these attacks. Okay.
Well, this is not an ambiguous case. The administration's actions are clearly illegal under the United States law and under international law. We do not have any authorization of military force to go into Syria. In fact, President Obama tried and then backed off in getting that authorization. We do not have any authorization of military force to attack Iran. The idea that this was an imminent attack on U.S. self-defense are simply not borne out by the facts. And under international law for self-defense, we have to go to the United Nations. The administration did not do that. So my concern is that this president ran on ending endless wars, ran on respecting the United States and international law, and these actions clearly violate both.
Okay, so that is a sitting congressperson laying it out for you in case you don't have to take it from me. Listen to a sitting congressperson who is very keen on issues of foreign policy. That is his wheelhouse, really. He is very strong on issues of foreign policy. He was, the sponsor. He's the author of the bill that, was the first time that the that Congress I think in modern history that Congress used the War Powers Act to stop a president from attacking, from supporting, attacks in a country and or military use of military force in a country. Unfortunately, that was against that was supposed to be leveled against Saudi Arabia in their genocide in Yemen, but Donald Trump, that was under Trump, and he vetoed that and continued to support Saudi Arabia as they attacked Biden, a policy which Joe Biden nominally says he's reversed, although we covered it on the show exactly why Joe Biden has not reversed that policy and why he still continues to support the genocide in Yemen. And that continues, that support for Saudi Arabia continues under Joe Biden to this day. And so this is just, what you have here is a, Ro Khanna says they do not have the authority to bomb Syria. They do not have the authority to attack Iran. So this idea that, this is against Iranian-backed forces, like, why are we doing that? And, we're trying to strike a peace deal, a nuclear peace deal with Iran. We were in, Obama, one of his best achievements was to enter into the Iran nuclear deal. Donald Trump, unfortunately, withdrew from the nuclear deal, which really, damaged, and made us less safe, destabilized the region in the Middle East. And so And Trump's reason for doing it was just because Obama did it, and he wanted to do everything the opposite of Obama and just undo Obama's legacy. And so that was his reason for supporting that. And so this idea that we need to somehow be tough on Iran, you don't make peace with your allies. You make peace with your enemies, right? And so in order to make peace deals, you cannot continue to attack a group and then claim that on one side of your mouth, we're trying to encourage them to enter into a peace agreement with us, but then on the other side of your mouth, you are sanctioning bombings of their military forces, unprovoked, attacks on their military, in sovereign countries. I mean, this is an abuse of power. This is U.S. militarism, U.S. imperialism at its finest. And I just fear that because Donald Trump isn't the one committing these actions, that our liberal friends are just sort of asleep on this and unwilling to criticize the Biden administration for what is an authoritarian, undemocratic, abuse of power and an illegal act of war. All right. And so Iran has no reason to continue to trust the U.S., but they are doing everything they can to maintain relations and to, they did after the bombing, they withdrew from upcoming talks to try to renegotiate the Iran deal, which by and large, they have been following even after Donald Trump withdrew from the agreement. They continue to follow that agreement with other members of the agreement, like Russia and other groups that were, party to it. And it was the U.S. that went back on their promises. And let me tell you, that is a bad sign for people in the future. If you think that that's good or anything, I mean, how should any country trust us to enter into any deal when depending on the president that comes in, we'll just completely rip up a deal that we agreed to and start all over. So that's totally unacceptable. And absurd. All right. And we just keep on funding them to the tune of nearly like a $750 billion every year to build bombs. We have no problem funding the endless wars and these, these military actions overseas that literally make us less safe. And we have no problem doing that under the guise of national security, but we can't seem to find a way to help poor people in need here in this country. Right. So it's absolutely absurd, and all the money that we spend, bombing other countries and supporting these foolish, military actions in other countries, that make nobody safer, is all money that could have been spent here at home to actually improve the lives of people, to maybe prevent just a few of those 500,000 deaths from COVID-19. Maybe we could have done some work to prevent those, instead of building bombs. Maybe we can pay some reparations to some Black folks. Maybe we can, increase the federal minimum wage. A point that I need to make about the $15 minimum wage that I did not make earlier, and it's too bad because it's gone, but whatever. Listen, I gotta sneak this point in on the $15 minimum wage real quick. If anyone is concerned, because the Congressional Budget Office released a report that said if they raise the minimum wage to $15 by 2025, they said it will lift 1 million people overall, net lift 1 million people out of poverty. All right. So 1 million fewer people. It's about 900,000. All right. So then that's a conservative estimate. 900,000 people will be lifted out of poverty overall. All right. Some will, so 900,000 stand to be lifted out of poverty. And they claim that 1.4 million jobs also stand to be lost. So now this should also be a red light, flashing red light to you. What that means is that even though 1.4 million people will lose their jobs, still net overall, 900,000 people will be lifted out of poverty. What that says to me is that your job and a wage is not connected to your ability to remain or not remain in poverty. All right. And so that should be pretty shocking, all right, is that, even though 1.5 million people are losing their jobs, 900,000 people more are going to be lifted out of poverty, right? But the real point that I want to make is that if that is a real concern of Democrats or anyone else, Republicans, Democrats, or independents, if your concern is that, oh no, raising the minimum wage is going to cause some small businesses to have to shut down, one, I support a subsidy for small businesses. If you have less than a certain number of employees, the government should subsidize those wages, right? I'm totally fine with that, all right? Through tax breaks or whatever, tax incentives, all kinds of things, right? So I totally support the government subsidizing the wages for smaller for smaller companies, small businesses, mom and pop shops, right? But also, I would totally support and do totally support a federal jobs guarantee. So you want to offset every job loss, just implement a federal jobs guarantee like we did in the 1930s and, under World War, World War I, and under FDR, we had a federal jobs guarantee, right? And we put people to work and we brought so many women into the workforce and we did a federal jobs guarantee. We can absolutely do another federal jobs guarantee so that anybody that loses a private capitalist job, a private job, a job in the private sector, they will have their job replaced by a job in the public sector. All right. And we can guarantee that. There's all kinds of projects that the US government, we need to totally rebuild our infrastructure. Look what just happened in Texas. All right. Look what's happening all around the country. All right. Like we totally need most of the infrastructure that we see. It was built in the 30s and 40s and 50s, right? After the New Deal, right? We need a Green New Deal. We need a New Deal. All right. That to rebuild the US infrastructure. All right. And there are plenty of jobs to go around, and we can absolutely provide a federal jobs guarantee that would offset any job loss. All right. So whenever somebody makes the argument, oh no, it's going to lose jobs, it's going to cause job loss. Well, there's a simple solution for that. Make the government guarantee people a job. All right. Me, I support a implementation of something like a Marcora law in Italy that would also provide, support for democratic worker cooperatives like they do in Italy. There's something called a Marcora law that says that if you become unemployed and you can get 9 other unemployed people together and you all agree to open a democratic workplace together, one worker, one vote, then they will provide you a lump sum. Instead of giving you weekly unemployment checks, they will give you a lump sum for the full year up front, as long as you agree to combine that money together to open up a democratic workplace. All right. And in that region of Italy, the Emilia-Romagna region of Italy, 1/3 of the GDP from that region of Italy comes from democratic workplaces. All right. From worker cooperatives. All right. So there are ways for us to support it. I would absolutely support that. I don't care for government, for the government to be the employer and for you to still have an employer-employee relationship. That's not what I personally support, but I could get behind a federal jobs guarantee that still did, state capitalist jobs where capitalism is defined by the employer-employee relationship. And, they like to call, what they do in China and what they did in Soviet Russia, they like to call that socialism. And it's a form of socialism. I'm not going to lie, that is one form that socialism took. But, original, and with socialists, there has always been a wing of socialists, that stay true to their original ideals and principles and said, that is not socialism, because that is simply changing the employer from a private entity to a public entity, right? So you still have the employer-employee relationship with the hiring and firing power. It's just that the employer is no longer a private corporation; they're just the government. I believe that doesn't make a whole lot of a difference of whether it happens to be a private enterprise or a government enterprise. I don't see either of those as an end of capitalism. It's just private capitalism versus state capitalism, as defined by economist Richard Wolff and other economists. And he's literally the economist who wrote the textbook on the different forms of economics, prevalent today. And he says that is what he would refer to as state capitalism, not as socialism or communism, because it simply shifts the employer from private enterprise to government enterprise. But it's still employer-employee relationship. It's not workers owning the means of production. That only happens in a worker self-directed enterprise. Workers controlling the means of production through a democratic means. One worker, one vote, all major decisions. All right. So, all right. Yeah. So I got a little off track on that. Sorry, on the minimum wage thing. I'm going to cut this at 3 hours. I promise. So 20 more minutes, and then we'll go through comments with the last 15 minutes or so. And we'll get through all the comments that we need to get through, and then we'll call it a night. All right. Okay. So yeah. So back to back to the topic at hand. Biden bombed Syria illegally, no congressional approval, and seemingly has no problem, ignoring procedure and rules when it comes to bombing, foreign countries. But apparently he's a real stickler for procedure and rules when it comes to a $15 minimum wage hike. He's a real stickler for obscure Senate procedures when it comes to anything that's going to help poor working class people. Canceling student loan debt, $15 minimum wage. Sorry, can't do that. Rules and norms and procedures. Yeah. Miss me with that. They don't care about it. It's selective, and it's selectively whatever helps the corporations and their big money donors and whatever, harms poor working class people, to be honest, because our goals are not aligned. All right. Okay. One more foreign policy story that I want to get to before we end this. And this one just like blew my mind. Biden's Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, had some audacity to tweet this out. Okay. So this is Biden's Secretary of State. For anyone not familiar with what a Secretary of State is, that's the person that is in charge of U.S. diplomacy. All right, they are the head of the State Department, which is the diplomatic arm of the U.S. government. All right, they're tasked with diplomacy with foreign governments. Okay, and so you have this guy, Tony Blinken, Biden's Secretary of State, tweeting out yesterday. He says, today, Venezuelan interim president Juan Guaido and I discussed our unwavering support for democracy in Venezuela and our efforts to improve the lives of the Venezuelan people. And there was just one thing wrong with this. Well, two things wrong with this. One, Juan Guaido is not the interim president of Venezuela, all right? And two, there is nothing democratic about the U.S. installing their own puppet president in a foreign government, all right? So the president of Venezuela is somebody named Nicolas Maduro, and you can have all the criticisms in the world you want to have of him, okay? And say he's a dictator and this and that. You know who else is a dictator? Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince of Saudi Arabia, who Joe Biden just chose to not sanction for literally murdering and dismembering a member of the United States press, Jamal Khashoggi, okay? He literally ordered the killing and dismemberment of this person at they did it at a Turkish embassy, all right? When Donald Trump was president. And there's audio of it. You can hear the man screaming as they cut off his fingers and start to chop him into pieces, all right? His wife, he was brought out in bags, all right? In pieces, in bags, all right? His wife dropped him off and waited for him outside. She never saw him again, all right? He was chopped up into pieces in the interrogation room and disappeared, all right? And Mohammed bin Salman, the crown prince of Saudi Arabia, in a recent intelligence report released by the Biden administration, was said by the U.S. intelligence agency, was said to have directly ordered and approved the assassination of Jamal and dismemberment of Jamal Khashoggi, all right? A member of the U.S. press who wrote in the Washington Post, all right? And Joe Biden has chosen not to sanction him, not to sanction him in any way, right? But yet we still hold sanctions over Venezuela, which are known to be harming the economic conditions for everyday people in Venezuela. So where our policies, our sanctions are harming this country. Now, an independent party went in and investigated the elections in Venezuela of Nicolas Maduro, and they said it was a fair election, a free and fair election that elected Nicolas Maduro. That was a proper act of democracy. And in fact, they even said that Venezuela has a more democratic process than the United States in selecting their president. Okay, so Juan Guaido, he's not even an elected official anymore. He's out of office entirely, right? Because he didn't even get reelected. Somebody who's not even an elected official anymore. He was not democratically elected as president. There was never a vote for him. He garnered less than 2% of the overall vote in the country to get the position that he got. It was less than 3%. It was like 2 or 3% of the overall country's vote. And And somehow the US wants to recognize, and this was Donald Trump. Donald Trump did the same thing, all right? So this is a continuation of Donald Trump's foreign policy, all right, against Venezuela. And you're sitting there with your puppet president, ignoring the sovereignty of another country and claiming, imagine if Russia or some other foreign country claimed that Mitch McConnell was the true president of the United States and said that they were going to work with Mitch McConnell or Donald Trump. Imagine if Russia was like, we recognize Donald Trump as the true president of the United States, and we will work with him instead of working with Joe Biden. Could you imagine the response from the Rachel Maddow, MSNBCs, CNN, ABC, CBS? Could you imagine the response from them if something like that occurred? And they will say that Russia, they attacked our democracy and this and that, and but this isn't an attack on democracy. This is an attack on democratic elections in a sovereign country. How it's inconsistent. It's inconsistent. So, and this is supposed to be the person responsible for diplomacy, all right? But we knew what Tony Blinken, you can go and see the covers that I've done on Tony Blinken. He's a corrupt, just stooge, of Biden's. And this is completely unsurprising to me or anyone, that has the unfortunate, job of having to pay close attention to this stuff. And forgive yourself if you don't pay close enough attention to this, because this stuff goes largely uncovered and uncriticized by our mainstream media. So if you consume mainstream news, you simply do not have this critique of, you might see Venezuela and you might hear of Nicolas Maduro and say, oh, he's a horrible dictator. And oh, look, people are starving and there's no food on the shelves, ignoring the fact that that's because of the US sanctions, the economic sanctions that the US has over them. This is what they do. Why are they doing this? Because Venezuela is the most oil-rich country in the entire world. All right. It's the most oil-rich country in the entire world, and we want their oil. All right. That's the reason. That's the whole damn reason. All right. Because the fossil fuel industry stands to benefit from this. All right. And all the people that take donations from fossil fuel companies, they all stand to benefit from this too. All right. And so here you have, people pretending as if they support democracy when this is the opposite of democracy. This is absolutely anti-democratic. Nicolas Maduro was democratically elected president of Venezuela, all right? And he's a socialist, sure. And he's not the same kind of socialist as me, all right? He's not my kind of socialist. He's more of a, what we would refer to as state capitalist, right? So he's not, not socialist in the same sense. He's not even socially democratic, really. He's not even a social democrat. It's really state capitalist, to be honest, but even that's a step too far. All right. And so, for the U.S. government, why? Because he doesn't play nice with the U.S., right? He's not a puppet for the U.S., U.S. imperialism and the fossil fuel industry, right? So because he wants sovereignty and sovereign control over Venezuela's oil, and to use the proceeds from the profits from that oil industry to benefit the people of Venezuela, then he's smeared in our media as a dictator, as a horrible dictator, while we sit here and support, we fund Mohammed bin Salman, MBS of Saudi Arabia, while he, dismembers journalists, executes women trying to fight for the right for women to have a right to drive in Saudi Arabia, but we support them, and he has the, but here we go. Apparently, he's totally cool with his Secretary of State, having a puppet, a dictator, essentially an unelected official, and treating them as the president of that country when they are not democratically elected. All right. You can see some of the comments here. And just to give you just a flavor, just to give you a quick taste of the comments, because people did solid work in these comments. All right. I'll just read a few. All right. This is just a random. I wasn't even planning to do this, but I'll just read a few randomly, just so that you get a taste of how people reacted to this tweet from Tony Blinken. At Defy Master says, this is too funny. You had discussions with a U.S. puppet, unelected to any office, president, regarding democracy. This is perfect U.S. empire hypocrisy. You are confused as to why the U.S. has so many people around the world who hate us. If you are confused as to why the U.S. has so many people around the world who hate us, here you go. All right. Another person at Lotta Nico says that puppet isn't the president, you bloodthirsty corporate ghoul. At Paranoid Glitch says the propaganda machine at work here, folks. Juan Guaido was not elected and is not interim anything. The people in Venezuela do not want or need your help. They just want the sanctions lifted and to be left alone. Some other ones that I won't read, because of the algorithm here. I don't want to cuss too much. Medea Benjamin, she's the head of Code Pink. All right, a women's organization, a progressive women's organization. They put on the Women's March in 2017 after Trump was elected. That massive march on Washington, the Women's March. She's the head of that organization, Code Pink. She tweets out and she says, "Are you kidding? Do you really think Guaido has standing as, quote, interim president? Let's get real, okay?" So that's at Medea Benjamin there. Socialist Boomer says, Guaido is the president of Venezuela to the same extent that Trump is president here. Not at all. When a coup attempt fails, we don't keep pretending it succeeded, all right? So, someone says Guaido belongs in a prison cell, and you, Mr. Blinken, supporting these criminals who murder and lynch women of color, people of color in Venezuela because they don't like the election results makes you no different than the people you're arresting in U.S. for their actions at the Capitol building. # shame on you. This is, they just post some images of people who have been, attacked by these, supporters of Guaido's, essentially. Okay, so, one last one I'll read from Jean Genevieve. One says, Maduro is the democratically elected president of Venezuela. Guaido is a fascist, didn't even run in the presidential election, and has attempted to assassinate Maduro twice. The U.S. needs to support Venezuela's social democracy. Exactly. See, they stated as social democracy, which I think it's much closer to than it's not socialist. All right. As much as I wish it were. All right. #Chavismo, #PSUV, whatever that is. And then they got the Venezuelan flag up. All right. So, okay. So you can see how people feel about it. And just want to share that because it's totally absurd. And this continued U.S. imperialism. And this is what we do. They have the Monroe Doctrine that says that the U.S. has first dibs on Latin America. And this is what we do. We have ravaged Latin America with our war on drugs and our CIA with U.S. imperialism. We want to have them be a subservient nations to our country. And they absolutely should not be. They deserve sovereignty. All right. Those people deserve sovereignty. There's nothing, you're an American exceptionalist if you believe that, if you believe Guaido is the president of Venezuela, then Donald Trump is the president. Then you should believe that Donald Trump is the president of the United States right now. Okay, so if you believe that, and I'm sure there's some Trump supporters that believe that, I got plenty to say to you. If you believe that if you're a Trump supporter and you believe that Guaido is the president of Venezuela, then you should believe that Nancy Pelosi is the president of the United States right now. Okay, so just miss me with that. All right. Or AOC is the president of the United States right now. Okay. So it's just, it's not based on reality. And it's really undemocratic. And it's, one Lee Camp from, he does a show called Redacted Tonight. He once pointed out, he says that, there's three things essentially that will get your country a US backed coup. Right. And that is if you have oil, or he says if you got at least two of these, if you have at least two of these things, he's like you should be on the lookout for a US backed coup in your country. If you even meet two of these, and if you match all three, then just look behind you because they're probably about to shiv you right now. All right. So he says if your country has oil is one. Is socialist 2, and 3 drops the US dollar as your reserve currency. All right. And Venezuela dropped the US dollar as their reserve currency. I believe they already dropped the US dollar or never had it as their reserve currency. So they did that. They are at least nominally socialist, and they got tons of oil. Okay. So if you're wondering why Venezuela, why do we propagandize against Venezuela so much? It's specifically because of that. All right. We just want their oil. All right. That's it. We just want their oil, and we want the fossil fuel industry to continue to profit off of them. And we're willing to ignore all democracy and to attack democracy in that country at the expense of all kinds of marginalized and poor people there. And we are sanctioning them right now. The U.S. has sanctions on that country that are damaging those poor and working class people, and not damaging people like the fascist a dictator Juan Guaido or something. That's who they should be sanctioning. They should be sanctioning Mohammed bin Salman. Instead, we sanction we're so concerned about sanctioning like Russia and Russian officials for their alleged poisoning of, Alexei Navalny, who's like an opposition leader in Russia, right? But, if you actually research Alexei Navalny, you would know that he's a white nationalist. He's a Russian white nationalist, all right? So the U.S. supports this guy, and Joe Biden and all these people come out there and support him, and liberals love this guy. They love Alexei Navalny, all right? They love Rachel Maddow and MSNBC. They love Alexei Navalny, right? The dude is an avowed racist, white nationalist, Islamophobe. It's horrendous. Xenophobe. He's so xenophobic. And you can hear him calling, Muslim immigrants cockroaches on video, like proudly smiling, laughing, talking about, kill this infestation of cockroaches. All right. So, and that's who that's their king. All right. This is your king. So, all right, that's that. I can't cover anymore. It's been 3 hours. I can't do any more stories. I wanted to get through. I think we got through most of what we had to cover today. Let me just take a quick scroll through my list and see what I missed. Oh, ACLU criticizing Biden's barbaric immigration policy. We'll pick that up on the next show. Cornel West threatening to leave Harvard after he was denied tenure. Want to talk about that. Don't really think I'll ever be able to address the Texas power outage, but let's all just agree that is free market capitalism at its finest there, and that's the result of free market capitalism. So to all those free market fundamentalists, what you get is what happened in Texas. Texas has their own power grid. The rest of the country has two power grids. There's the Eastern power grid, the Western power grid, and there's the Texas power grid. All right. And they did that back in the 30s to avoid federal regulation. And lo and behold, cold snap hits, and all the natural gas and nuclear even facilities and oil and coal, they all had frozen instruments and couldn't provide energy to the citizens when it mattered most. So I don't have time to cover that story, but hopefully, it's a couple weeks old now, but it's still an ongoing pain for people in Texas. And sadly, it's disproportionately impacting Black and brown communities. And so I just wanted to call that out as well. All right. So that's all of the stories that we have for today. Do we have any comments that we want to get to before we go? What Up America says, Kamala, do you think private student loans should be forgiven too or nah? I do believe that private student loans should be forgiven. One, I just think that the bureaucracy that you create is going to cost so much that it's just cheaper overall to just forgive them all. And there are some people that went to private institutions that are marginalized people, that are poor people, that are working class people, that fought tooth and nail to get into these private institutions. They do all kinds of things, Harvard, Princeton, like you can get, partial scholarships, and poor people, working class people go to private institutions and end up, holding debt in those private institutions. And so I absolutely believe that all federal student debt should be canceled. And I even believe that the little 1% of debt, student debt that's not federal debt, I wish that the government would find a way to pay that off, right? To just take on absorb that cost and to pay that down, because there's some people that were at like nonprofit institutions that took out private loans, and I think that they deserve to have. I went to ITT. It's a nonprofit. It's for-profit private institution, and they force you to take out private loans, and those schools are disproportionately attended by Black people. And so in private loans that when you can't get a federal loan, you get a private loan, are also disproportionately held by Black and brown people. And so I absolutely think you have to forgive all student debt, including at private institutions and including for private loans as well. And I think that's because, and I think that moving forward, you can say all public institutions are free, and we just need to improve the quality of all of our public institutions to ensure that you're not forced to go to a private institution. That really is a financial choice that people are making when they can afford to do so. But you should have a chance at the finest education, public education that is on offer, and we should normalize and standardize, sort of, not standardized to like standardized testing or anything, but improve across the board all public education, public institutions of education. And yes, I do support canceling all student loan debt, including private institutions, because those people didn't have a choice of a public institution, a free public institution. And I honestly think that even then, we should not have the amount of debt that we have. It just shouldn't cost that much to go to any school, even a private school. So I went to a public school. My debt is held at a public institution, but I still support canceling the debt at private institutions. All right. And so, I went to a public institution, University of Massachusetts. Please, if you haven't done so already, hit the like button down below, subscribe, share. You want to hit any more comments that we want to get to? No more comments. All right, y'all. All right. That's that. I just want to give a massive shout out to everyone who joined us today, commenting, What Up America, X, who was here earlier but couldn't stick around, Hassan Mendoza, Sedalia Silva, Tammy Van, I think Corey Saylor. Thank you to all of you for commenting, for engaging in the chat. Really appreciate that. Mills in the building. Also, so everyone that chatted today, American Social Democracy, thank you so much for participating, for engaging in the chat. Thank you so much to all of our supporters, as always, our supporters on Ko-fi and Patreon. We need your support. We need recurring donations in order to sustain this show and this program. We try to bring you information that these billion-dollar mainstream outlets are not bringing you. And so please help us to, build a democratic workplace and to overthrow capitalism one democratic institution at a time. And just support independent Black left media. You can support us on Ko-fi as low as $1 a month, just $1 a month. You can do $1 a month. You can cancel it anytime. No shame in that. We deeply appreciate your support, and we need it. We need it to sustain. So please, if you haven't done so already, sign up, become a member for as low as $1 a month on Ko-fi, ko-fi.com/radical democracy. You can also support us on Patreon if you're already on Patreon. Ko-fi just takes less money from us, so that's the way to get the most money directly to us. You can also support us on Patreon, patreon.com/radical democracy. Links to both of those are in the description box below. So all you got to do is just open up the description box, click the link, and support, right? And we will shout you out and thank you forever and ever and ever for your support. I'm just going to do a quick check to see if we got any new donations, and it looks like we did. What Up America? Shout out to What Up America, who donated an hour ago and says, What Up America says, keep it up. Great news and commentary. Y'all are getting faster at these stories. Nice job. Thank you so much, What Up. And you're going to see more content from me now. I just had to take a little mental health break, and I'm back in it, and I am itching to go. And so you're going to see some more content from me. I'm going to be making an appearance on the Vanguard. I didn't see what we finalized. It's either going to be tomorrow night at 9 p.m. or Monday at 6 p.m. I'll post in the Discord and on YouTube whenever and in Patreon and Ko-fi whenever I get final confirmation from them on the time that I'll be appearing. But I'm going to make an appearance on the Vanguard podcast coming up. And really looking forward to that. Always have a great time chatting with Zach and Gavin from the Vanguard. Check them out if you don't already. They do great work, interviews, they're doing tons of great work. And so, shout out to them and, fellow leftists. So So yeah, and we're going to be putting out more content now, so look forward to that, and please help support us. Coffee. So thank you to What Up America for that tip. Appreciate the heck out of that, comrade. Love your new Twitter picture, by the way. The red lipstick is definitely dope. It's dope. So good stuff. And just shout out to What Up America. What Up America, for anyone that doesn't know, is the person who did the intro music for the show. So love what they did there, and absolutely blown away by that work. So thank you so much to What Up America for producing our song. Just nothing but love. They're Plasmon. That you can find them Plasmon on what is that thing? SoundCloud. I think SoundCloud. You can find Plasmon. They do some other work, and it's incredible. Deeply appreciate their support. Shout out to X as well for their work on our logo, and Tammy, our super producer, who helped with the logo, helps with design, and helped with just helps put the show together every time we do one of these. So she's in there popping up comments, reading through the comments, commenting, moderating the chat, helping me with titles, thumbnails, publishing videos, scheduling. I mean, the work she does, it's immeasurable. She deserves to be paid for her labor. The only way we're ever going to do that is to support the show, help fund us. If you're already funding us, you don't have to do any more. You're already doing enough. All of y'all are incredible for all of the support that you do. What Up America also supports the show financially. So just thank you so much to all of you. You're all incredible. And this is honestly, this is our show. When I talk about it, I constantly make sure that I am saying our show. I don't like to call it my show. It is not my show. This is our show. This is all of us. This is what, I'm trying to build this as democratically as we can. Y'all make this show better. All of our comrades, our community, you make it better. We want to feature you more on the show. I want to work on getting a phone line for the show, and to do something. I think I'm going to try something where I'm going to start to publish a guest invite link to the show. And if you want to pop on and just have a few minutes to say something, we're going to do it'll be the equivalent of a call-in show, but you can do a video chat, right? So I'm going to have the phone lines for people that just want to call in. You don't want to show your face. You don't want to do video chat. That's fine. I'm going to get a number so that we can do a call-in show. But I also want to I'm going to post the guest link, and we can have up to 8 guests in the queue and stuff. And so I'll just publish the link in our Discord and other places, and probably in the video description, and anyone will be able to just join the podcast, and you get a little chance to speak your mind, speak your piece, say whatever you have to say, whatever's on your mind. I just want to give the mic back to the people and open up the platform, give people the platform to speak, since y'all support it and y'all make it happen. So especially, to our supporters, we will definitely open up that feature initially. At first, we may just do it to our supporters, and then we will hopefully eventually just open that up to the community at large. We absolutely want to platform people in the community more. Hassan Mendoza says, glad you are back on the air. I thought you might have quit when the squad refused to force the vote. I know that really, there were a few moves that really, I'll tell you, it is hard to cover the news as just an independent journalist when you're not making money off of it. The news can be so depressing at times. It's such a burden to carry, to have to read through this stuff. And if you really care about it, because I really care about this stuff, I'm a really empathetic person as well, just by nature. And I know all of us, if you're watching the show, you care a lot. You care a lot about these issues. And so when you care about this, it can take such a toll on you and on your mental health. So make sure you're doing the proper self-care. You're taking care of yourself. You're taking care of others around you when you have the capacity to do so. Support each other, mutual aid, just mutual support and community, build community and solidarity, right? And just show solidarity with others, and try to understand, what people are going through. This does not pay the bills. I'm constantly in this, this phase of this is what I want to do with my life, and this is what I would rather be doing with my time. But the bills. What am I going to do to pay those bills? And so, I struggle with my own mental health challenges, and these past few weeks have certainly been a challenge for me. And so I needed to step back, and I don't want to be ashamed and stigmatize that. And so I just want to try to do my small part to break through that stigma of mental health and say that I needed some mental health days to just recuperate from, so much terrible news. So Hassan, you're not all the way too far off. That was one of those things that really hurt. It wasn't really what the squad did so much as what I saw people that I considered, comrades and allies of mine, and their reaction to it and their response to it, and the lack of urgency I saw on the left around that issue. I think we are going to be paying the price for that for years to come. I truly believe that was likely our only hope of pushing the ball forward on Medicare for all for the next 2 to 4 years. I truly believe that. Anything else that happens would have happened already. I think that was the only chance that we had to actually move the ball ourselves in any significant way. Naturally, just the way that the younger generation is going. Over time, the younger generation is much more progressive, and they're holding on to that progressivism. And so over time, the country's moving to the left, but it's not happening soon enough. And I think that forcing the vote was an important way for that to happen. And they just didn't come out and support it. And that hurt. And then tons of other news stories. And then just mental health, and the challenges and just life and all that stuff, getting in the way. And so I needed some time off to just, get my things together, get things in order. And I'm back now, and hopefully we'll be back for a while. But from time to time, I'm going to need to take some mental health breaks. In general, we should all be taking vacations and taking time off. And I don't want to, be doing this like, hustle porn type stuff where it's like hustle. And, that's all I would like to. I only want to work 4-day weeks at max. I don't want anyone else that I'm working with or that's working with Radical Democracy working more than 4 days a week, 30 hours a week. That's what I want. That's my whole goal. And so I want to be able to do this show and do what I can with 30 hours a week instead of, being a hypocrite and telling people, oh, we should be working 30 hours a week while I sit there and work 40, 50, 60 hours a week and burn myself out. I don't want to do that. And so I'm trying not to burn out and to take frequent breaks and to do a little bit of self-care. So when you see me take a hiatus, sometimes I struggle with, giving you the announcement and the heads up. I'll try to be better about that. But if you see me gone for a little bit, fear not, I will be back. I promise you. I've got an opinion on everything, and I always want to bring that opinion and try to inform people and use my platform to try to inform and educate where we can and build solidarity and build unity and try to push this movement forward, the left movement, the socialist movement, workplace democracy movement. So I absolutely thank you all for bearing with me, for being patient, sticking with me, riding with me, everyone that financially supports. Literally, you're my motivation to keep going all the time. So, I don't think I could get up every day and do it without knowing that we had folks that care that much to support with even $1, even if it's just $1. I know what that means in this day and age when people are hurting so much. The folks that are watching this are by and large, disproportionately marginalized folks, Black, Latino, trans, just queer people, immigrants, So I thank you all. I thank you all for all your support and deeply appreciate you. Any other comments we want to get to? What's up?
I don't know. There's one that's kind of off topic and long.
All right, I'm gonna read this comment, but I don't know if I can respond to this comment. But S. O'Brien Games says African American language and language ideology are used in hip hop to represent the collective lived experience of racism and injustice in America. That's what's known as AAVE, African American Vernacular English, or Ebonics, is what it used to be called, right? And so AAVE and so are used in hip hop to represent the collective lived experience of racism and injustice in America. From your own perspective, describe how mainstream overlooks this cultural voice and expression. What is the cost to mainstream America overlooking and understanding hip hop as a significant African American cultural voice? Okay. Huh? Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. I'm overlooking and underestimating hip hop as a significant African American cultural voice. I think that I like I said, I have an opinion on everything. I won't go too deep into this. But what I will say is that I think that just like, women's work in this country, Black people's language has been devalued and attacked in the mainstream for as long as I can remember, right? This idea that AAVE, African American Vernacular English, right, our slang, Ebonics, that somehow, when someone speaks that, the assumption culturally is that person is less educated, they're dumber, they're less educated, they're less valuable of a human being because of that lack of education in our society, right? And so I think that by devaluing those things, degrading those things, in those cultural norms, it simply is an act of, let's be real, white supremacy that says that if you speak this way, you are somehow smarter because you speak the way that I'm speaking right now, right? And I can switch it up. In Black people, we got something that we context switch, right? Depending on the context that you're in, you'll speak a little differently. If I'm hanging around, if I'm in the hood, I'm talking one way. If I'm around friends, if I'm speaking to you, if I'm speaking in a classroom or a professional event, it's entirely different. Your interview voice. We all saw Sorry to Bother You, right? Most people here have seen Sorry to Bother You. And know that it's you got your white voice, they call it, or whatever, right? And I think Noam Chomsky really said it best when he said that if Black people were the dominant people in our society, then AAVE would be considered the norm, and people who spoke like what I'm speaking like right now and what Noam Chomsky speaks like, they would be considered by default the dumb ones, all right, in the ignorant ones. But instead, we just apply this and we think, and really, I mean, some of the vernacular of hip hop and AAVE has been proven to be actually more useful and to have created new forms of language that don't exist in standard English. All right, the idea of the we be chilling all the time, right? Like, be chilling, like that tensing is something that doesn't exist in that cannot be conveyed in any way in standard English, right? The only way to convey that is with the AAVE, all right? And the reality is that if Black people were considered the default in society, then their language, their slang would be considered the default, and people that spoke like like this, like the standard English way, would be the ones that were considered by default the dumb ones, the ignorant ones. And so we should recognize that and acknowledge that and realize that there are other aspects of hip hop culture that I don't totally rock with and agree with, and they have some. It can be very misogynistic and like many other all kinds of music, like rock and roll can be super misogynistic. Johnny Cash talked about like killing women and abusing women and stuff, right? He got invited by George Bush to the White House, right? So I think that what it does is it just devalues it devalues Black people in general, right? It makes them it makes the default to consider Black people dumber. It excuses things like employers not hiring people or providing people with opportunities because they speak a certain way, and it reinforces those sort of white supremacist ideals, and ultimately it has a negative economic impact on Black people, on so African American or Black people in the country, and people that grow up around that culture and speak that way. And so I think that what it does is it just gives a pass to capitalists, enterprises to devalue those workers, to pay them less because they're not as educated, when really there really is a what do they call it, like education of the streets, like school of the hard knocks kind of thing, like street smarts, of course, like, and that is a form of intelligence, right? And depending on how you structure IQ tests, you get radically different results for different groups of people. Because white folks have the power to structure. They're the ones that are have institutional power over things like IQ. And so they get to define what a high IQ even is. And there's studies that were done that say, like, if you structured IQ tests a different way, folks like Aboriginal, Australians would be considered the smartest people in society. There are ways for African people, Indigenous Africans, to be considered the smartest people, for Indigenous, Americans to be considered, the smartest people, based on just structuring the test differently, right? So I definitely think that it just stands to devalue Black culture and to try to suppress and oppress Black people in the country. So. Sorry, that was my best attempt I think it's a really interesting, a great question, by the way, S.O. Brian Games. So thank you for that great question. I think I love questions like that, and I really appreciate that. Please keep those coming. That was a question on Twitch. So S.O. Brian Games, watching us on Twitch, thank you so much for doing that. Please follow us on Twitch if you're not following us on there already. And thank you for that really, really good question there. So all right. Any other comments we want to get to before we wrap up? Tammy, this is Tammy dropping some knowledge here. She says, also language and culture adapts. That's just how it works. How the average American, I'm going to get Tammy to start using the mic again. I promise. We bought Tammy a mic through a fundraiser, and we will get Tammy back on the mic. I promise y'all. There's just sound issues because we're in the same room, and it becomes very difficult to get the sound to work properly, sadly. But Tammy says, also language and culture adapts. That's just how it works. How the average American speaks or even writes academically now is different or modernized compared to how the language was from even as recent as just 50 years ago. Slang and dialects are culturally significant because it's representative of specific groups and a reflection of the times. Also, music in all its genres can have messages or can just be for entertainment's sake. Yeah, exactly. Like music in all genres. Some music is conscious music, as we would call it, and hip hop, and has a powerful message behind it. And sometimes it's just for entertainment purposes, right? Just club songs and club bangers and things like that. And country music has it, and just fun and upbeat and, just fun songs, and rock has it, and pop has it. And they all, all different forms of music have it. And hip hop is no different. Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah. All right. We're rounding the corner to 3.5 hours, and we got to wrap, y'all. So, thanks to everyone who joined us today. Like, subscribe, share, please keep an eye out for the clips that we'll make of this, and share those out too. Even if you already watched this show, and so you don't got to watch the clips, please share those clips out still on your social media. We really need your support to help spread the word. This channel is not growing at the speed that we need this channel to grow at. It's hard out here being a marginalized leftist. So just support us whatever way you can. If you can't afford to support financially, just support us by sharing these out, liking all of our videos, share them out, and tell your friends to subscribe, right? Tell your friends to subscribe, share it out on social media, wherever you are, right? Okay. I think that's that, y'all. Peace.